Redditors who have nearly been murdered, but talked your way out of it. What did you say to your would-be killer that saved your life? My brother was attacked in our house by a guy with a knife. My brother didn't know the guy had a knife when he put the guy in a headlock. When he whistled for dad, the guy dropped the knife and covered his ear. By the way, my brother can whistle at about 120 dB, louder if he's angry. So, my brother pulled the guy's hand off his ear, put his mouth down to the guy's ear, and just whistled as loudly as he could 4 or 5 times. When dad got to them and threw the guy out the door, the guy couldn't even stand up straight as his equilibrium had been thrown completely off. He's probably still deaf. Edit. RIP my inbox. First time I've ever said that. Some clarification for some of you. The guy got in the house because my brother used to leave the door to the basement, his apartment, unlocked all the time, so people could come and go whenever. The guy was the new boyfriend of my brother's ex who was pissed at him for some reason. This was years ago, so I forget. Clarification from on the knife on reflection. The guy dropped it when my brother slammed the door on his hand. But he didn't realize the guy had a knife until dad pulled the guy away. The whistling does cause his own ears to ring for a bit. He probably does have some hearing loss in that range. As he gets older, he's pushing 40, he'll likely notice the hearing loss. Apparently cops were called. I didn't know anything about that. To the r/thatherpant people, grow the fuck up. I'll see if I can get a dB meter and a video of my brother whistling. Edit 2. I'll have to thank my brother for the highest upvoted post I've ever had. Edit 3. Fixed a word in first edit. Edit 4. Sorry, fixed some previous edits based on clarification from brother. He's stoked that this has gone so big. It was my sister's 21st birthday and the whole family and a couple of my sister's friends decide, let's all go out to bar. So we go 3 cars deep to this small bar. Night starts off fine, everyone's dancing and drinking, then this group of 15 people come in, and as soon as they walk in they start bumping into people, rapping girls, and challenging their guys to do something. I tell my girl we gotta watch out for these assholes, so we stay clear of them until the end of the night. Me and my girl kept to ourselves just watching everyone, and we see these assholes surrounding my sister's friend, so I go and pull him away from the situation and ask what happened. He just complimented the guys on their hat because we're 49er fans. So those guys leave. We head out. About 20 minutes later, I grab my sister and her 2 friends and we head to the car. As we're walking to the car, I see 3 guys from that asshole group walk towards my car from the other side of the parking lot. I tell everyone get in the car and my girl is forcing my sisters and her friends inside while I approach these guys. Me, what's good them? What's up homie, you guys got a problem? Me, nah, whatever happened inside just leave it inside, it's my sister's birthday, we're not trying to have any shit go down tonight. Are we good? I should have known some shit was about to go down. One of them was holding his shirt over his face and the other had his hat down real low and was holding his waist. But the main guy looks at them, said yeah we're good, and I shake his hand and then the other guy's hand, but then this guy with his hat real low won't shake my hand and won't take his hand off his waist, so I say your boy says we're cool, we don't want no problems. At this moment my uncle and my best friend come around the corner and start yelling yo, hey, and that's when it happened. All 3 guys pulled out their guns, started shooting in the air, and then shot towards my uncle and best friend. Everyone starts screaming, but I didn't flinch. It was really weird. I just looked around, and one of the guys says what about him, and looks right at me, and just says fuck it, and they run back to their cars. I walk to my car and drive down to where my uncle and friend were, stop the car and just hear my mom and aunt screaming that my uncle got shot. Cops came, spent the next 2 hours talking to the cops about what happened, what they looked like, etc. Found out why they approached us later that night. Apparently while my sister, uncles, and friends were outside smoking, those guys came outside to smoke, and while smoking, said some racist shit to our friends and they ended up pushing and shoving, and my sister decked one of them. They found the guys later, and we tested feel against them. They're each serving 15 to 20 years. My uncle was really lucky they shot him in the back, and they missed all his organs. I found out later that before they left the bar they were in the bathroom snorting crystal meth, and that they were planning on just walking up to the car and unloading. I'm a motorcycle rider. Just over a year ago I purchased my Cena 20S, and at the time, it met all my expectations. Great sound quality for music, clear calls, and contact with my fellow riders. Little did I know that one day it would save my life. On the 28th of February 2016 around 9:30 p.m. I came home from a ride. I got off my bike in the driveway, where I was met by a man with a gun, who had broken into my home. He demanded I enter the house, and as I approached the door, threw my cell phone onto the ground. As I crossed the threshold I was forced to the ground and my hands and feet were bound with phone cord. The intruder resumed his vicious ransacking of my house, while I lay there in my helmet wondering what was going to happen to me when he was done. Sometime later my roommate pulled up and parked his car in the garage. The intruder ran out the front door to confront him. I heard a scuffle outside for a few minutes, after which my roommate was forced into the house, bloodied, beaten and then bound in a separate room from myself. The destruction of the house continued once again. He discovered the safe, pistol, and rifle cases, violently demanding the keys and combinations, while kicking my roommate. He began speaking irrationally about how he was looking for kiddie-born and assault rifles, how someone sent him to our house months earlier, and he had been watching the house for a couple days. He was going to hold us for about 2 days, while he cleaned up his fingerprints, and burned parts of the house, to get rid of any DNA. He would then drive us to the middle of nowhere, and leave us for dead. While he was spending time in the back room attempting the break into the safe, I was able to break one of my hands free and turn my Cena on. The moment the Cena said phone connected I had a small glimmer of hope. The noise of the intruder breaking into the safe granted me an opportunity to access the voice command speed dial system on the Cena. Whispering quietly, I didn't necessarily care who it ended up calling. I just prayed for anyone to answer. My father, who is 3 hours ahead on the Eastern time zone, answered, and I repeatedly whispered 91191119111. He eventually replied back to me 911, confirming he knew there was a problem. I then started repeatedly whispering my address, at which point the intruder came around the corner and yelled at me, "What's that noise?" I told him it's just the radio playing in the helmet and I can't turn it off. He proceeded to take a hammer to the side of my helmet while it was still on my head, destroying the Cena. He grabbed the remains and threw them in the toilet. He then started a fire in the fireplace to burn random items from around the house, including his own shoes, which he replaced with the shoes directly off my feet. My father eventually tried calling back, but when my cell phone rang, the intruder smashed it with the hammer and threw it in the fire as well. The police finally arrived and noticed the blood on ground from the scuffle and called for backup. The intruder became nervous. He unbound me and instructed me to answer the door and send the cops away. I agreed, stood up and approached the front door. The police were shouting "Local police dept, open the door," over and over again, and my roommate shouted back from the other room, "We are in here," repeatedly. The intruder ran to the other room to silence my roommate. I reached out and opened the door to 5 or 6 officers with weapons drawn. I ran out into the front yard yelling "hostage" with my hands up, hoping no one would shoot. As I was about to be restrained, behind me the intruder slammed the door. The police quickly withdrew back to the street. I was escorted by an officer as fast as possible to the street, barely able to keep my footing as we moved, dragged through the front lawn, and placed in the back of the squad car. I updated them on the situation inside the house and how to distinguish between my roommate and the intruder. The local SWAT team was called in to secure the house. After another 2 hours or so, my roommate was finally able to escape his bindings and make his way out of the house, beat up but safe. The intruder ended up escaping out the back door of the house somewhere in that 2-hour window of time. The entire ordeal lasted around 6 hours. The suspect has been found in jail from unrelated charges and was linked to the case with evidence found at my house 6/17. After a year of bullshitting the court system with an attempt at getting off on mental disorder and the state psych hospital saying he is fit to stand trial, he was sentenced to prison with 26 years plus. TLDR guy broken. I was held hostage with threats to kill me. Roommate came home and intruder attempted to discharge weapon, but the weapon's safety was still on. Called 911 from Bluetooth and motorcycle helmet. Guy got away for a time. Edit. To the persons who gave me gold, after 6 years of lurking around this place it seems I found the right thread to tell my story, and I'm glad you enjoyed my story so much. Dunno if this counts, but I was alone by a lake one evening a few years ago. Insects were humming around, their wings glistening in the fading sunlight, and fish swam near my feet. It was super chill, and I've rarely felt more peaceful, until someone moved in the bushes. Now, normally I would have ignored this. People came and went from this spot fairly frequently. It was a popular makiat spot. But, something felt off this time. The person was taking too long, like they were trying to be quiet. I thought maybe it was a couple messing around, so I got to my feet and started to leave. As I turned to the exit, a man stepped from the bushes. He had a metal rod in one hand and a cord in the other. My first thought was that he was just collecting trash, but a second later, before I could even register why, I was suddenly, viscerally angry. I wanted to hurt this man more than I've ever wanted to hurt anyone before. I think he saw the crazy in my eyes or something though, cause he hesitated and forced this weird smile. I was unarmed, but I slowly reached around my back, like I was putting my hand on a gun, and he moved back into the bushes. A few moments later he re-emerged empty-handed and asked how the fish were today. I said good, flashed a smile, and left. TLDR, crazy vibed a suspicious stranger into small talk. He may have only been there to spear fish, looking back on it. 3 come to mind for me. I'll go in chronological order. I'll also keep these concise, to not reveal identities. So the first time I'd ever had my life knowingly threatened. We had a neighbor who lived close by. These are apartment complexes, who would openly smoke weed and act very thuggish. Not uncommon, but he started having a falling out with our maintenance man because he needed someone to look tougher than. The maintenance guy was a well-groomed man, so he didn't look like a threat, but more like easy prey. One day this escalated from an argument between them with the help of neighbors coming out shouting things like fight, kick his ass and so on. Our maintenance man just wanted to do his job until the unruly neighbor pulled out a revolver, looked like a .44. Enter me. At the time I didn't have much going for me, so I saw life as one big joke. I really didn't care for life or death, and hated the thought of taking either seriously. Call it ballsy, reckless or just outright retarded, but I stepped through the circle that had formed and stopped between the firearm and the maintenance man. All I said was if you plan on killing this man you'll have to become a child killer first. I was maybe 16 over 17 at the time, but this guy realized his bluff was called. Started mouthing off, then went back into his apartment. He didn't live there much longer and probably pissed off someone else with a gun by now. The second time is much more complicated. I was living with my mother and sister and her boyfriend at the time. I was working in Stockton though, so I would stay at my dad's, very far apart. A good drive is all I'll say to that, and I was a property manager, a job I will forever regret taking. So the glory of my job was going to a fairly rundown neighborhood, asking for this month's money, and returning to the actual mansion of my employer. Also included was replacing damaged property, cleaning mold off ceilings that had spread across almost the whole ceiling, and cleaning the needles, fesses, and whatever was in the fridge and sink previous tenants would leave behind. I had recently finished doing this for one such property which would house a very rude tenant. Before this guy moved in he seemed nice, family looked lovely, and I knew it was a load of bullshit, but I was told they were clear to rent. Now, at the time I was using parts that the owner would purchase for me, so there was a slightly used water heater that would become pivotal. The new tenant kept complaining there was no hot water, so I would have to go out, 30-minute or so drive, and relight it. It would hold a flame, then I'd leave satisfied. This happened about a dozen times in 1 month. I really thought this guy was taking the piss when one day he and his neighbor across the way started standing around me while I was working. They made it clear they were ex-gang members and they even knew each other. Say what you want, but I was only surprised they said ex considering they had young wanabes hanging around them. But since I was depriving him and his family of hot water they could sue, but they weren't interested, instead saying they could just make an example of me. Now between my previous experience and this one a lot of shit had gone down, so I owned a firearm, 92 FS, but wasn't allowed to bring it as it might provoke or unsettle any tenants who see it, so I had a taser. I made quick work of what I was doing and started heading back for my truck to avoid conflict. It was parked 2 houses down as I wasn't originally here to help water heater guy. There were 3 apes hanging around the truck, and I heard 4 sets of feet behind me instead of 2. I realize what I'm standing in and stop, look around and no one is out, so I turn keeping the 4 behind in view and listening for the other 3. Water heater guy pulls a knife and the neighbor looks like he is reaching behind himself while Thetwo nobody apes start walking up. I made the mental note not to panic, don't give them any thoughts, I'm not prepared. So I start reaching behind myself, a total bluff as the taser was in the truck. Neighbor guy stops reaching, and the apes slow their pace way more cautious. I should be a poker player, because I just looked as cold and dead as possible, nearly shouting in an authoritative tone. Learned from my granddad who is a Marine veteran, step past that rock, pointing with my eyes, and I'll put you fakers down quicker than you can blink. I must have sounded serious, since they all went back to their houses, and I got in that truck, burned out around the corner and quit. A week or 2 later. Turned out this all happened because the owner got a propane water heater and not natural gas. I never thought to check that until the week I quit. And number 3. Remember how I mentioned my sister's boyfriend was staying with us? Well, while I was dealing with shit like that, our mother was faking him, and in the meantime a gossipy neighbor somehow got word they were and told my sister. So I come through the door to my sister screaming, her boyfriend freaking crying, and our mother trying to explain. If you have 2 brain cells you'd probably just turn around and say fuck that. Well dear Ela, after a long day of work, I was not you. So I just open up with what the fuck? This leads to scream crying at me from the beach boy, scream explaining from my idiot mother, and just screaming from my sister. It was quite educational. So my sister retreats to her room, they stay in the living room by my command, and I try to talk with my sister. So neighbor Beach hears the screaming and starts taunting everyone through the window. Beach boy bails, and I open my sister's door. She sees me and her reaction. She has a violent history, since we all know she is imbalanced, but no one including herself wanted to continue anger counseling or anything. Keep in mind I have the patience of a saint, was to grab a picture frame off the wall and smash it over my head. My arms are trying to keep glass off my face when she throws the longest, closest shard she can find, and Odin must have blessed this throw, because it went straight for my throat. With cat-like spaz reflexes I lower my right arm, catching the shard in my wrist, just missing every vein like they all just became near. Left a cute little scar. Thinking that her assault was over, I'm in full hey I understand you're angry, let's sort this out together mode, but it quickly becomes hey I and a holy shit she's lunging with another shard of glass mode. I used to spar with a boxer, not professional, so I sidestepped, and she stabbed the door behind me, then starts running for the main door. Life-threatening part over? So I follow, tell our mother to call the cops, and she tries to make a run for who even knows. I didn't want to harm her, so I grabbed her from behind, buckled her knee with a kick, and then sat on her shoulders, so she was stuck sitting. She bites and scratches me some. Cops show up and have guns drawn on me until I back away, hands way up and out, and witnesses point to her explaining. EMT did show up, but the glass didn't penetrate anything important. I practiced medicine, so I just went back inside and finally got to sleep. I didn't press charges, but that's just me. Bonus round. Nearly got shot in the UK at an airport for sneaking up on and hugging my wife in a very hostagey hold. She screamed. Security readied his rifle. She giggled and hugged and kissed me, and as we spun around I saw him putting his rifle back to his side. Any other times or events I'll keep to myself, as I'm no saint, just the patience, and I was also dumb once upon a couple dozen times. Learned my kink for electricity. Hope you enjoyed, and have an awesome and much safer day. Wow, finally something I can contribute to. 1. I grew up in a bad neighborhood and had to talk my way out tack honors all the time. 2nd, I later studied sociology and criminology and kinda put the pieces together. C. I grew up in one of those post-Soviet cities with huge grey concrete blocks. It was pretty common that drunken teenage evenings would end up in someone getting beaten, stabbed or such. Guns were rare, but people would get badly cut by broken bottles all the time. I was a weak, skinny pale dude. You'd think the first one to be beaten up. Nope, never got so much as seriously punched in the face. One of the very few guys I know who have this privilege. There's some luck too, but there is a method. My method was always the same. Quickly define the situation according to my rules. My first girlfriend didn't like to go out downtown with me at first, because as soon as we've met, for instance, an aggressive group of drunken teenagers waving broken bottles that I knew we'd have to deal with anyway, I would calmly come to them and ask for a cigarette or ask for a change. I would pick the one person that looked most sober and calm and just start talking to them. I used this trick tons of times. Once I was standing at an ATM, withdrawing money, and two huge guys appeared out of nowhere, approaching me quickly. Before they managed to say anything, I blurted out, "You from around here? You do look like you know your way around. See, I'm looking for this bar here." They were clearly put off balance, but one of them mumbled something along the line that yeah, they are from around there. They ended up showing me the way to a bar I didn't even want to come to anyway. Another time two guys who were clearly high as fuck on amphetamine or such, and were impromptu rapping, and at the same time terrorizing a good half of a bus with a huge pair of pincers. Yep, that's a fun tool to be carrying around. I was able not only to leave me alone, but I sat with them, joking around, slowly getting them down and basically stopping them from cutting into a guy's ear. We split ways as best buds. Now, the key word to understand is situation. In sociology there's this amazing book The Preservation of Self in Everyday Life by E. Goffman. The guy argues that in all social situations we basically jump into a role and just play the damn role. So I'm the guy who rides the train, the guy who buys a ticket, the guy who hits on a woman, the teacher, the husband, the guy who is arguing in bar over sport, or whatever. The behaviors and roles are mostly written, we just replay them. Now, the victim who is hit by three drunken guys at a bus station is also a role, and if you are very quick you can stop the encountered from becoming this situation, and invite the guys into a completely different situation. It may well become four drunken guys talking about sports smoking cigarettes at a bus station. No BS, I've done it a number of times and still am doing it regularly, whenever I see shit coming. You wouldn't believe how malleable people are when it comes to defining situations. Granted, that won't work on someone who is a professional on a job. You won't steer a professional pickpocket into becoming your drunken best pal. These are rare, however. Most thieves are not professionals, by the way, and the safest thing to do is give them whatever they want. The thing is, that very few roles actually involve, as a hard non-negotiable condition, punching someone in the face or stabbing them. Thieves never want that. They want the cash. Aggressive drunks may want that, but this is never about you. They are looking for someone who will play with them. The mini-play called The Victim Who Is Hit by Three Drunken Guys at a Bus Station. They will force you into this scenario, sure, but if you act quickly and with a cool head, you can change it into a different situation. The second trick, the one that works with groups, is to become part of the group. That's why you quickly select the one person that's not that drunk, and not that aggressive, or simply looks talkable. If they do as much as answer your question, that they don't have a cigarette, you're probably good. Then you mumble "fuck" and ask it. There's a place nearby where you can buy a pack. If he starts thinking and looking around, you're in the green. At this point his drunken pals are looking at you, but now you're part of the group. You see. You still have to be on your guard, but you're good now. 95% of success is staying calm, because you being frightened is only part of those scenarios that you don't want to go into. The perfect stance is calm innocence, like asking them for a cigarette is the normalest thing to do. The thing to avoid is bravado too, because it wakes up their inner male and stirs their testosterone. Never talk to the ladies in the company first too. Might seem like a reasonable scenario to get into the group, but it isn't. Instead, you are now hitting on their ladies. I know it sounds dopey, but it did save me from a number of life-threatening and certainly dangerous situations. Not sure how much this counts, but here we go. When I was little we lived next to an honest-to-God psychopath serial killer in training. She was probably about 11, and I was 5 or so. She killed tons of animals, used to make me watch, did random shit to torture me, etc. I told my mother some of the shit she did, but she was convinced I was making it up. Apparently, it's difficult to believe some 11-year-old is shoving wires down kids' throats and drowning puppies. Especially since she was female. Once, she was pulling me along in a little red wagon and just kind of stopped behind a car that was parked on the curb. I was totally oblivious at the time, but she made sure no one could see us and then waited for a car to shove me out in front of. Luckily the car wasn't going too fast and stopped before hitting me. My mother finally believed me when she caught little Miss Murderer beating the ever-living hell out of a toddler one day. She had him pinned against the wall on the side of the garage where no one would see and was just choking and punching him. My mother was sure she would have killed him if she hadn't caught her. Kid apparently ran off while my mom was chewing the serial killer's ass, but nothing else ever came of it. I'm absolutely certain that she's either dead or has killed someone or some owns. Those are the only two possible outcomes. I didn't exactly talk my way out of it, but there was some mild pleading involved. I was staying at a sketchy motel on the Ox/La County line and happened to be drinking quite a bit, about a fifth of vodka, and smoked a little weed to forget that I was staying at a shithole. I had a decent alcohol tolerance at the time, so I was fairly drunk, but nowhere near blitzed. I was hanging out with some sketchy dudes in front of the motel. One of him asked for a lighter, and I loaned him mine, and then the guy and a few others went inside their room. They came out a while later, and at some point, I tripped over a foot-tall block wall separating the motel sidewalk from the parking lot. I did a sweet roll right back onto my feet. I laughed about it, and the guy I had loaned my lighter to told me that I'm being too loud and to go to my room. I informed him that I'd go to my room if someone loaned me lighter so I could smoke a cigarette before I went to sleep. I'd completely forgotten I had loaned this guy my lighter earlier. He commanded me to go to my room. I commanded him to loan me a lighter. This went on a couple more times until he came up behind me and sucker punched me. I was a pacifist at the time and told him that I don't want to fight. He punched me again. This went on another couple times until we ended up in a 20 feet long hallway that was gated at the end. I was cornered with my back to the wall while his 6'4", 250 number yoked aft buddy covered in prison tats guarded the only exit to the hallway. And then he pulled out a knife and he proceeded to try to stab me in the gut over and over in a fast and violent prison shanking manner. I'd been punched a few times in my life, but I've never defended myself, never boxed, never wrestled, never taken a self-defense class, but by pure instinct, I blocked every advance with my elbows. He must have thrusted at me at least 20 times, and I blocked every single attack. And then he stopped, and he stared at me. I told him once again that I didn't want to fight, I just wanted a faking lighter so that I could smoke a cigarette before bed. And he and his buddy just walked away without a word. The knife tip punctured the bone in my elbow a quarter inch, but that was the only injury I sustained. I found out the next day that he had been smoking meth, probably why he wanted my lighter, and I somehow out-reflexed him with the better part of a fifth of vodka and a bit of weed in blood. All I can say is that mountain biking and driving at freeway speeds through the desert in my truck must have given me some ungodly reflexes, enough so to overcome a shanking from a wire hole high on the world's scariest stimulant known to man. I had just closed down and locked the office up. It was around 9 and almost everything is closed. Almost meaning there is a bar open down the way. I park in front of that bar on purpose every morning because it's always open and pretty busy. I'm walking down the empty street and start rounding the corner where the bar is when someone calls me from behind. Creepy guy. Excuse me, miss. I'm sorry to bother you, but I haven't eaten all day and I'm starving. Me, still trying to round the corner. If you're hungry, there's a bar down the way. I can buy you something there. Creepy guy. Nah, that bar is expensive. I'd feel bad. There's a fast food place on the other side of this street though. Super cheap. Really close. Me, rounded corner and getting into view of bar. I don't care about the price of the food. Knows for a fact the other side of the street is a dead-end alley. If you're hungry I'll feed you, but we go where I say. Creepy guy then grabbed my arm trying to force me away from view of bar and towards the alley. I screamed to let go of me and used all my strength to stomp at his foot and push me away from him to get to the front of the bar. I screamed, "Let go of me, I don't know this man." And a group of bikers stood up from their outdoor table and the creep bolted. Don't know what he had planned for me, but I knew he wasn't planning on me making it. I was walking home late at night across town to pick up some medicine for my girlfriend. I don't drive and was walking down the main highway. I had music blasting in my ears and was completely zoned out for the entire walk until I saw a guy on a BMX bike with a backpack on the opposite side of the highway beeline right for me. He stopped his bike about 5 feet from me, unzipped his backpack, and reached in while saying, "I'm going to fucking kill you." I started to pull what looked like a paint can with a handle until I put my hands up and said, "Dude, are you seriously going to shoot me? For what? I haven't got any money." At which point his eyes went wide and stuffed a weird metal thing into his bag and got out of phone. "Oh fuck man, I'm sorry. I thought you were this guy in a rival gang that beat up one of my buddies. Here, let me show you on my phone." And he showed me what the rest of the metal thing was. It was a homemade gun that looked like it was made of pipes and was in the shape of a submachine gun. I have no idea if it worked or why he was going through the effort of unlocking his phone, scrolling through his entire gallery just to show me the thing he almost killed me with. Then he told me to have a nice night and to please not call the cops on him for almost killing me, then rode off. Was a weird night. I was living in some apartments directly across the street from the new Dallas Cowboys stadium in Arlington. Not the worst area of town, but definitely not the best. This apartment complex is basically at the back of a Walmart parking lot. Due to the proximity of the apartments to the Walmart and how busy it usually was during the day, I typically did my grocery shopping late at night. Also, I was in college, so I would usually get inebriated before doing so. Despite how close it was, I always drove because I buy in bulk and I'm an American, so super lazy when the opportunity presents. After one late night run, I get back and start unloading. It's 2 AM at this point, so after dropping my first load inside, I was just overcome with a weird feeling that I should leave my wallet and cell phone inside. I go to get the next load. I know I'm a beater that can't carry all my groceries in one trip, and see the guy who lives above me pull into the lot. I notice he passed the last available spot and think to myself, "Ah, sucks for him. He's going to have to drive around and come back to that first spot he passed." I take that load in, go back to my car for number 3, grab several bags from my backseat, pull my head up, and the barrel of a pistol is about 4 inches from my face, right between my eyes. "Jim, your wallet, if you don't wanna die tonight." I don't have it on me, man. "Jim, your phone." "Then I don't have that either." At this point, I have 2 bags of groceries on each arm and my keys in my pocket. Avoiding eye contact the whole time, I consider offering him my keys, but made the internal decision of fact that if he asks for them, I will give them up, but I'm not going to volunteer them. I say, "Oh, you can have these groceries?" He says, "Are you the guy from the PT Cruiser?" I'm literally standing next to my Chevy Cavalier as my neighbor from above in his PT Cruiser turns the corner from missing the spots earlier and parks. I hated doing this, but I hated having a gun in my face more, so I said, "Nah bro," pointed at my neighbor parking, and said, "That's a PT Cruiser." Gunman and his partner, also strapped, sprint over to my neighbor's car right as he opens his front door. The other one puts a gun in his face and yells, "Jim, your wallet." I see some fumbling before my neighbor yelled a 4-digit number, clearly his PIN. One of the burglars asked the other if they should steal his car, but they decided against it. As they drove off, my neighbor walked past me with the look of death on his face, didn't say a word or acknowledge my presence, and went straight up to his place. I had always wondered what I would think about if I was staring death in the face, and at least at that moment of my life it was total frustration and anger. I was so mad that I had wasted all that time studying and working for a future that I might not get to have. At that moment, I wished I had opened a bunch of credit cards over the last year and just went on a ton of trips, blowing money I didn't have, that I'd never have to pay back. Now that I have continued to live, I'm glad I went to college and did not follow my fear of death plan. TLDR, held up at gunpoint, directed muggers to only person nearby, managed to keep all of my groceries, edit, formatting. My ex-boyfriend was, and still is, ignorantly insane. While this may sound like an odd combo, let me explain. He definitely had suicidal ideations and some kind of depressive disorder. It didn't much help that he had been using hard drugs for over a year. This would count for the insane part. As for the ignorance part, he always seemed to think everything he did in his life only affected him, no one else, regardless of how messed up his actions were. With that in mind, imagine a small 2-story cabin in the middle of nowhere, Indiana, miles away from my home and family with little to no cell phone service. I had no way to leave because I didn't have my license, and he drove us. We were the only ones there, no parents, family, friends, etc. And the people who knew I was there didn't have the address or even city name. You can see how, if something had gone wrong, I was really screwed. What's even worse was I was excited about a quiet day in the woods with this psycho. Anyway, he's kind of showing me around and cones across his hunting rifle. He starts telling me about all of its features while admiring it, and all of a sudden points it at my face. He was probably 5 feet away from me with the rifle in my face, explaining how the bullet would tear through certain parts of my body. It felt like forever, but in all reality it was probably under 30 seconds until I interrupted. I said, "I really hope that isn't loaded." "I didn't even think about that," he responded with an almost sarcastic voice. Then he laughs and reassures me, No, I might be weird, but I wouldn't point a loaded gun at you, blah blah blah." He opens the front door and pulls the trigger to prove it isn't loaded. Remember, this was all wooded, no neighbors or people around to potentially be shot, and the gun faking fires. Not only did he have a loaded gun in the house, but he had a loaded gun with the safety off in his house. That was the exact moment I realized, if his crazy didn't kill me, his ignorance would. I broke up with him shortly after he dropped me off safely at my house. Years ago, I was at a local pub that I frequented because my buddy half owned the bar. This night there was a wedding party going on and the usual guests. Now I have no idea what started it, but someone got shot outside. Not normal for my area. And a waitress runs in and asks me to go outside and see if I can give first aid. I say no problem and hurry outside to see a group of people standing over a young man. They are screaming he has been shot and acting typically hysterical. Out of the corner of my eye in the parking lot, I see a man pacing. I walk towards him and he points a gun directly in my face. I tell him I'm a medic and just there to help and ask if he is okay. He screams, "I don't know you," and continues to act excited and pointing the gun at me. I try to reassure him I'm only there to help and hold my hands up in the surrender position. This goes on for around a minute, and as I see the local police coming into the parking lot, I dive for cover as his back is facing the oncoming police. The jump scares the guy he shoots. The police scream to drop the weapon, but he aims at them, and the police shoot him in the shoulder and the neck. After around another minute, I ask the officer with the shotgun on me if I can administer first aid to the guy as he is choking on his blood. They give me the green light and I save the guy by clamping an artery, by jamming a finger in his neck and pinching it off. After a long state police interview, swabs of the blood from my hands, and being deposed by multiple lawyers, I find out that some off-duty police from the next state came here to drink. Got into a fight with the wedding party. Shot a guy in the spine. He has since recovered, I think. Shooter hit. And guy with gun on me was drunk, terrified rookie cop friend. So yay, it's one hell of a story I get to tell family and friends. I save a guy who tried to shoot me. I was at a farmhouse, about to get out of the car when seemingly out of nowhere this dude is on top of me with some kind of an assault rifle. I didn't have shit on me, no weapons, nothing. So I just stood there, motionless, because I knew I was dead to rights. That is when he said, "You'll be my first." I've never done this before. He was standing, just as motionless as me, not really pointing the gun in my direction. Quickly, I decided to keep the communication going. "Oh, well, I don't have to be your first then." He replied, "Yay, I was hoping you would help me." Needless to say, I had never been in a situation like this before. I didn't see any other options, so I simply said, "Oh, yay, okay. What do you want to do?" He said, "Let's go in the farmhouse while you help me figure things out." At this point I thought I was faked again, but I was at his mercy, so I thought, fuck it, I guess I gotta see it through at this point. I walked into the house and he followed me. He was real paranoid or something because he kept looking behind us and shutting every door I walked through. I had no clue what he would want me to help him figure out, but I knew that he seemed reasonable so far, so that maybe I could charm him or build a rapport. Not gonna lie, I was also expecting to get domed at any second. Instead, we get to my room and he gives me a pistol. Okay, I think this is really faking awkward. Should I just try and kill him before he kills me? Then he asks what should we use, and he starts taking all kinds of crazy shit out of his backpack. This motherfucker was ready for some kind of war or some shit. He even had some sort of body armor, a live grenade, some kind of military grade medical kit, and a bunch of Red Bull. It was at the point I said, well, the first rule is that you trust no one. Then I shot him in the head a few times and picked up all of his supplies. Even with all of that though, I still didn't even make top 5 because PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds is pretty faking hard. I guess it was karma, but I think I taught the guy a valuable lesson. I often think back to that day and wonder what would have happened if I had done things different. What if I had chose a different path? Could things have turned out better? If I had to do it over again I would not have been as rash. I was 16, up a ski hill that has a very strong local party scene. The area was in the peak of booming opiate trade. I was walking up the hill to get to this place where I'd hear there was going to be a party that night. I hitch a ride with this dude who had a faking massive truck. He's also heading there. Didn't think much of it at the time. But we were chatting and he asks me if I want to roll a joint. I'm like, no worries. So he tosses me a bag of weed that's like, I dunno, probably 4 ounces, like enough to keep 16-year-old me happy for a year. I'm retarded and impressed, whatever. Roll a J and smoke with him. Get to the party and I somehow managed to score a few drinks and get a bit drunk. Anyway, chat with a bunch of people and somehow keep telling people about dude's big truck and how I got a ride with him, and I keep my trap shut about his biggest bag of weed, but eventually I blab about it to some people. Later on in the night, somehow I had drawn some attention to him and he didn't want that attention, and I saw some people talking to him and pointing at me and he looks very annoyed, so I take that as my cue to leave. I walk out and I got a long way to walk back to where my family was staying. Anyway, he comes out and walks after me. He's with 2 other dudes and I'm just kinda thinking that this probably isn't the best situation, but here I am, so I guess I got a deal. He's yelling at me about something, but I keep walking, so he starts running, catches up to me and is like, who are you? And tell me one reason I shouldn't kill you right now. I turn around, notice he's holding a knife, but there's nowhere to run to, and he's got 2 guys with him, so look at him straight in the eye and take a step closer to him, so I'm face to face and close up. I say I don't know who you are or what you do. I'm just here to snowboard and I'm here with my family. I'm nobody you know and nobody you fear. I'm going to turn around, walk back to where I'm staying, and you'll never see me again. He didn't say anything, so I turned around and walked away. He turned around and walked back to the thing and that was that. About 10 minutes later I kinda went into shock and started uncontrollably trembling, and it wasn't from the cold. I got back to where we were staying and decided I'd hang with my dad and brother the next few nights and go low profile, which I think was reasonably prudent. Not my story, my dad's. Doubt he would have been killed, but it's a good story. So he's in some faked up area of Philly, don't remember where, walking, and he hears a voice from behind him go, give me your wallet. My dad turns. The guy has a gun. My dad knew what kind of gun it was, but I don't remember, and the guy was clearly a druggie. So my dad goes, alright, calm down. He pulls out his wallet and hands it over. The thief starts going through it. My dad goes, can I at least get my driver's license back? I'm a truck driver, man. It'll be a beach to get a new one. The guy goes, yeah okay. Hands over my dad's driver's license. And what about my credit cards? You know how difficult banks are. The thief is like, that's true, man, and hands over my dad's credit and debit cards. My dad only had about $13 in his wallet. Can I have my cash back? It's not much, but it was my money for lunch, oh yeah. My bad dude, and my dad gets his cash back. As soon as he does, my dad goes, "That's a really nice gun. You know how expensive that is." The thief didn't know anything about the gun. So for a few minutes my dad and this guy are talking about the gun. Finally my dad goes, "Alright man, I've gotta get going. Can I get my wallet back?" The guy hands over my dad's wallet, and they part ways. Okay, so I didn't talk my way out of it exactly. I just handed over the money as best I could, while being held up at gunpoint. This was 8 or 9 years ago, and I was working the graveyard shift at a CVS. I worked there with this 88 years old lady supervisor. She was seriously 88, faking years old, and worked overnight. Did so for ages. A sweeter old lady you will never meet. She would bring me home cooked meals. Our main goals during this shift were to man the cash registers up front and manage the store's inventory out back, receive large shipments and stock the shelves, etc. She wasn't very good at doing the inventory, and I hated dealing with customers, so our arrangement was she manned the front of the house, and I worked on the inventory in back. Okay, so on the night in question I was in the back sorting things out and munching on a candy bar around 2 AM. She pages me to the front over the store's PA system. I make my way over, rounding the corner of an aisle to the front when BHAM, there he is, a guy with a gun pointing it right at me. Supervisor wants me to open up the second register for the robber. It turns out she had told the robber that she was unable to open the second register and that only I had the access to do so. This was absolutely false. She was the supervisor and could open any register or lock in the store, of which she was fully aware. I don't call attention to this fact or make any kind of protest. I just head over to the drawer with my hands in the air, candy bar still in hand, and open the register. As we are getting the money out, she keeps missing the bag and dropping bills on the ground in plain view of everyone, seeming to deliberately miss the bag and getting bills everywhere but the bag. At point this, I don't know what to think. I'm just trying to get all the money in the bag to get this gun out of my face, but my supervisor is dropping money all over the place. "Hey, what are you doing? Get the money in the bag," I asked her. To our assailant's agreement, "Yeah, put the faking money in the bag right the fuck now," he yells. "Alright, whatever you want, Jesus," I say. The drawer is finally empty, and I'm handing the bag to the guy, with lots of bills still on the ground. As I'm handing the bag over, my supervisor picks up the phone and dials 911, again in plain view of everyone. I can't believe what I'm seeing, and I'm hoping that this guy doesn't shoot me. Robber grabs the bag and bolts out the door. Police arrive roughly 1 minute later. Super fast response because a customer had been in the store and witnessed what was going on well before my supervisor dialed 911. They never caught the guy, and I never wore those pants again. This was back around 2005, but I had a run-in with this kid I'd been tutoring for a while through a government social program. He came from a pretty rough background, so it's not like this came from nowhere, but he'd been with us since childhood, so it was pretty easy to ignore the warning signs while they were coming up. That's why they tell us not to be emotional with the kids. You don't like to think there's a formula, but when you're coming from a single parent household with low/no income and you're stuck in a hard neighborhood, you learn that there are stereotypes for a reason. He ended up splitting from his family really early on, and after some years on the road, he took my lead and eventually joined up in the program. At the time it was really good for him. We did some good work and even got to do some minor travel on the company dime for their outreach program. Kid even got a pretty steady girlfriend. Anyway, the girl gets pregnant when he's like 16, and everything kind of collapsed. To keep everything afloat, he ended up getting mixed in with some pretty awful people. Kept coming in with screwed up eyes, punking at everyone for no real reason. He was visibly messed up. Honestly, I just had blinders on because to me, he was just a kid, until the one night I drove up to his place and saw him choking out his then very pregnant girlfriend. I stepped out, dropped my coat, and we just start pummeling each other. For the most part it was just posturing, but he pulled a blade, and it stops being all love taps and gets serious real quick. I dial it back and try talking it out, reminding him of all the work we'd done and all the people we'd helped, doing everything I could to remind him how far he came, and I'm furious, but we both knew I was on the high ground. But his head was messed up, and his eyes were all bugged out, so while we are talking, I took out my own piece, and in hindsight, if I wasn't carrying, I'd be dead. I've got a military background, and I'm no small fry, so that should been the end of it, but he's messed up, so he comes at me anyway. It was the worst thing in the world, but training kicked in, and I cut off his arms and legs, and got his girlfriend out of there before the emperor could show up, and take the kids, to help him rule the galaxy. Was 18, wanted to buy weed. Bleep my guy, next till days, at 4 AM. Someone else answered, but whatever. Met him in a different spot that usual. I went with 2 friends. Got there and he told me to come down myself. It felt a little sketchy, so I just brought $20 with me, left phone and everything in car with friends. I get like 100 yards away where these 2 guys are. As soon I get to them, they open up their jacket and one has a Tech 9 on a strap, pointed at my stomach. You'd think I'd be scared, but for some reason I didn't feel like I would be shot. They patted me down and made me empty my pockets, which only had $20 in them. I told them I was just trying to get weed. What happened was earlier in the day they put a gun to my guy's neck and stole his money, phone, weed, whatever. So when I called they thought I was some badass coming in to get the sheet back. I had 2 people with me and I walked to them with not a care in the world. Like my nuts were huge lol. They ended up saying I was cool and I could go. I asked them if they had any weed anyway and they pulled out some regs and cigarette wrap. I said I'm good and left with my $20. Sounds fake, but 100% true. I found out later they were Crips, and later on one of them saw a blood outside of a club and killed him. He went to jail with a lot of bloods and got stabbed really bad. That's my story. Edit. This was in Westchester, New York, by the way. Won't say what city, but there's only a few it'd likely be. Edit 2. There's more details to the story I'd anyone is interested, but it's late, and I'd have to write it tomorrow. I was pretty drunk one night at the bar with my girlfriend at the time, and some of our friends. One of our friends got blackout drunk, and was about to fall asleep on the bar, so I offered to drive her home in her own car, so she wouldn't have to come back in the morning, and I'd just walk back. My girlfriend at the time decided to come with us. So we drop this girl off, park her car, and start walking about a mile back to the bar. Halfway back, we pass through a somewhat rough area. A homeless looking man, looking very suspicious and shifty, walks up to us and asks for $1. I truthfully tell him, sorry man, but I just spent all my cash at the bar, I have nothing. He gets irate and reaches into his pocket and says that he has a gun and that he's going to shoot me and take all my money anyway. Being nearly blackout drunk myself, I bust out laughing and tell him, fuck off man, you don't have a gun, and you're not fooling anyone you bussy, in a good-natured manner, like you'd tell off a friend that was obviously faking with you. I take my girlfriend's hand, and we just walk around him. His hand is still in his pocket, reaching for his gun. He has a completely dumbfounded look on his face. I realize about 2 blocks away, he was trying to mug us. Lol. My girlfriend was not pleased. I should add that I'm a pretty small dude, and the dude was pretty big. He wouldn't have even needed a gun to completely ruin me. I have no idea what I was thinking. I just wasn't thinking. I'm not a brave man. Sober me would have probably stuttered a lot and offered him anything he wanted. But nope, drunk me just wants to joke around with everyone apparently. Well, it was something my friend said that got me out of getting shot. I was at a Walmart parking lot with a few friends. After we got done shooting, we were behind a truck when a woman popped out with a gun and pointed it roughly at my knees from about 10 yards away. I was closest, so I was the lucky one that ended up looking down the barrel. She was obviously worked up and was claiming that we were going to rob her. I was pretty mad and said, did you pull a faking gun on me? Or something of that nature. Adrenaline was flowing pretty hard. She confirmed the fact by cocking the hammer on the revolver and saying something along the lines of I will shoot your ass. Again, I paraphrase a little, but I remember her mentioning my ass. Fortunately this woman's husband worked at this Walmart with my friend who was there. He got her attention and asked if she recognized him. She calmed down and got back in her truck. Didn't say sorry or anything. Her husband is part of an outlaw biker gang and they are known users and dealers of meth. She seemed like she was tweaking a bit. I don't want to sound like my friends and I are badasses or anything, but if she got a shot off, it would not have been good. There were 5 of us, and we all have concealed handgun carry license, and we all carry Glock 19s. Plus we shoot and practice a lot. I didn't want to shoot her, and I didn't think this was going to end cleanly. All I was thinking when she was pointing that gun at me was that if she brings it up anymore, I'm going to draw mine and start shooting. Talk about a faking rush. Took me a while to get off that adrenaline high. My friends and I eventually laughed it off that next day. Edited because of missing words and spelling. Sheet, I'm probably too late, but I have one that fits pretty well. I used to attend a college in northern Florida, and every winter during break, I'd make the 12-hour drive back to Maryland to get some time with the family. Well, one year, while I was on my way back down to school, I stopped for gas in North Carolina at this rinky-dink little no-name gas station of 95. As I'm filling my tank, 2 cars pull up. One pulls up to the pump right next to me, the other 2 pulls up to the other side of the pump I'm using. Both cars were older Cadillacs and the gentleman that hopped out, well frankly, looked like gangbangers. Tattoos everywhere, no shirts, the whole deal. The car to the left of me pops his hood and stands next to his car. Neither one has even looked at the gas pumps so far. I know a bit about cars and this little voice in my head told me to ask the guys if they needed any help. So I took the few steps over and asked if everything was alright with the car. The guy gave me this weird look, like he couldn't tell if I was serious, and said the car sounded off. I tried to get him to be more specific, but he sounded like he was making up answers on the spot. Eventually he said it's kinda squeaky. I told him that a squealing noise is usually a bad belt and asked if he wanted me to have a look. He just kept giving me the weirdest, most incredulous look, like what the fuck is this little white boy doing, but eventually said nah, I think it's fine. He shut the hood and waved a hand at the driver of the other car, who hops in his own vehicle, and both pull out. Neither one got gas or went into the little gas station store. After they pulled out and I finished filling up my tank, I went into the store to grab my change. I overpaid for my fill up by a bit. When I get up to the counter, the attendant's face was white, like ghost white. Apparently there had already been 2 carjackings at the station, one where the victim was stabbed, and the attendant had already called the police. I stuck around and gave descriptions, but since nothing actually happened in my case I just went on my way afterwards. There's no way I cold replaced my car on a student budget, and it would have made my life exponentially more difficult. I was already a subper student, and I could easily have ended up not finishing my degree, and as a consequence not having the life I currently enjoy. So yeah, listen to that little voice in your head. It knows what the fuck it's talking about, unless it's telling you to burn things. In 2012 I was on a 2-week trip in Berlin to find a flat and get to know my soon-to-be university. Until day 13 or so I was really keeping my money together, so on the last day I still had around 200 euros with me. I proceeded to take my girlfriend at the time to a fancy restaurant and bought myself a protective case for my iPhone and such. Anyway, fast forward to the night before I had to head back home, and some friends who already lived there asked me to meet them at this amazing underground bar. It didn't have a sign or anything, so I had to guide myself with Google Maps in my phone. Also I didn't had any clean clothes left but a very fancy, good looking outfit I took with me for the flat appointments. It was 1:30 AM, raining, and Google led me to a dark alley in a not so nice neighborhood in Berlin. But I was so focused to find that place that I didn't even notice how empty the streets were. Suddenly a young Turkish dude who was about a head smaller than I was tapped my shoulder and told me he didn't want my iPhone, but I had to give him all of my money. As someone from a really crimeless town in the middle of the forests of Germany who wasn't used to something like this, I naturally just said something like, "What? No?" So he then proceeded to be more demanding and looked back to the next corner where about 15 to 20 guys from different ages and locations around the world stood and looked angrily and ready to beat me senseless. As I recognized this, I told him that it was my last evening in Berlin and that I had spent everything but €5 and just wanted to get a last drink with my friends. He called me a liar in a loud and really demanding voice as his friends started to take the first steps towards us. So, still not really aware of what was just happening, I gave him my wallet and told him to take a look himself. He saw the lonely fiver, suddenly became totally relaxed, laughed, and before he went back to his friends he just said, "Dude, you look like you have a lot of money. Why do you dress like that in this part of the city?" Then he throws me a kiss and heads back to his friends, who proceed to laugh at me collectively. Well, since I live in Germany and the criminals here are somewhat not that into straight up murdering people, Jesus Christ, what is going in the rest of the world? You savages, it's more of a mugging story, but I'm sure, if I hadn't been that oblivious to what was happening there, I would have been beaten to a cripple that night. Oh, and as I found out about 10 seconds later, the bar was on the exact other side of the road. By the way, I told this story to my friends and they all bought me drinks for the rest of the night, so basically I somehow even made money through this. Perhaps not nearly murdered, but I was mugged with a gun on my head some 7 years back this month. I was 20. Just moved out of my parents' house into an apartment nearby with a new job and a new start at college. I got off work around 10:30, got some Wendy's, then pulled up outside my apartment and started throwing out some trash from the back of my car into the dumpster. A car backs into a spot 40 yards away. Two girls approached me and asked if they could borrow my phone to make a call. I already knew shit was going down and hesitated as I pulled my phone out. As I hand it over, one of them pulls a gun on me with a handkerchief wrapped around the grip. I only saw it out of the corner of my eye, so I swatted it away thinking she just had her hand in my face or something. As I looked up, she held it to my head and said, "Give me all your Skrilla." I gave her the cash in my front pocket, asked if she wanted the change too. No. I then managed to get my phone back, promising I wouldn't call the cops. I called the cops. Nothing happened. Sounds fairly benign by the standards of some of these stories, but this is the first summer I haven't felt terrified leaving work in the same summer evening air that I remember from that night. I've briefly mentioned the event in some much older comments, but I finally feel comfortable describing it more fully now. Looking back, it is kind of a hilarious encounter, but perhaps that is just gallows humor speaking. I'm late to this thread, so this will probably get buried, but I have a good one for this. When I was 10, I moved to a West African country where I lived until I graduated high school. I loved being there and generally felt very safe, except for this one event. To preface, it was around the end of Ramadan, where it is traditional that families have a big feast, so there is a great deal of pressure on the men of the families to buy a goat and other foods for the whole family, which often causes a spike in crime. It all started with me and a buddy heading downtown to hang out until we were supposed to meet our friends at a pool hall. We were walking around looking for something to do until we saw an older gentleman who approached us and started making conversation. He told us he knew of a great hookah bar where some Lebanese people would go for drinks and hookah and offered to take us there, so we followed. Mistake number 1. On our way there he met a friend who joined us, but when we got there it was closed. At this point the friend said he knew of another cool bar, but it was a little further, so it would be best if we took a cab. My friend and I naively got in the taxi with these two strangers. Mistake number 2. We noticed the cab taking some weird turns and we ended up in a poor downtown neighborhood that had no street lights or anything. The cab stopped on the side of the street, and at this point I realized something was wrong. The older guy who was with us in the back opens the door and walks out, telling us to wait. The guy up front begins to explain the situation. He tells us that their friend's daughter was raped by two European, French, soldiers at a hotel. He says they fit our description. Two young white guys with buzz cuts. He tells us that the older guy went to get the friend and that if he recognizes us, they are going to kill us. At this point my friend and I are freaking out, but we know it wasn't us. We begin to explain we are just high school students and neither of us are even French. He tells us that's what we'd say if we did it. The older guy comes back, and he has his friend, and about 10 other guys surrounding the cab. The older friend takes a look at us, and he looks unsure. They walk away to discuss, while my friend and I awaited our fate. The original older guy came to the window, and said that we are lucky, because he says we didn't do it. At this point the guy in the front tells us something along the lines of, okay, so you didn't trap her. We won't kill you. I know you have expensive smartphones, watches, shoes, etc. We don't want any of that. Just give me whatever cash you have, and you can leave. We had about $40 between the both of us, which we handed over. The guy gives about $10 to the taxi driver and tells him to take us wherever we want to go, and leaves. We told the taxi driver to just go, and eventually we went to meet our friends. To this day I don't know if they actually planned on killing us, or it was just an elaborate scam they had to rob people, but I still felt very threatened, and that if the guy had wrongly identified us, we could have died right there. TLDR, friend and I got kidnapped, threatened, and robbed. One of the kidnappers paid for our cab on the way home. Overall 4/10 kidnapping. When I was 19, my boyfriend, his best friend and I used to hang out at his brother's house 24/7. Brother was a drug dealer, but I'd been friends with him since high school. He started off selling just pot. However, by the time this incident happened he'd graduated to Molly, pain pills, things like that. So the four of us were hanging out one night. I'd say it was around 2 to 3 am, and 5 guys in ski mask bust through the door. They tie the 4 of us up and proceed to ransack the place. They took all of his money, all of his drugs, all the while we are just sitting there on the couch with rope around our wrists. They were yelling, waving around guns. I knew I was going to die. One of them, who I later found out was a guy I had been friends with in high school, like I'm talking he dated my best friend. We were really close. He came up to me, put the gun right up against my forehead, leaned over me, and turned the music up as loud as it would go and said, "Start praying, because you're about to be dead." My response was, "Make it quick, and let's get this over with." I have no explanation as to why this worked for me. What I do know is that he was no longer interested in shooting me, and he chose to instead hit me with the butt of his gun a couple of times. Then, just like that, it was over. I had been using drugs heavy for nearly 5 years at that point, and I was so dead inside I didn't even care. I was about to get my brains blown out. I think he picked up on it and got bored. Took the fun out of it for him when I didn't beg for my life. He's a car salesman now. Was working on an ambulance. We are driving on the highway in a thunderstorm, and we see a guy standing on the railing of the overpass we are on. Not an official call, but we hit the lights, stop, and I get out. Probably not medical, but my partner goes to grab the trauma bag, and I approach the guy. Standard, "Hey, you okay? What's going on?" Guy is pretty upset, still on railing. I'm considering grabbing him, but if I do it wrong, we are both going to fall about 50 feet into traffic. He's talking about how his boyfriend cheated on him and left him and kicked him out, so now he's homeless. All this time he is still on the concrete railing. I'm about 6 feet away. I ask him to step down so we can talk easier. Surprisingly, he does immediately. Great. Progress. We are about the same size. So I'm thinking without him on the railing, if I have to tackle him, I would probably be okay. My partner is a few feet back. I walk closer to the guy, putting hand on shoulder. Yeah, at this point I kinda get cliche and tell him things will look better soon. EMT, not social worker. He turns to me while I'm still touching him and gets this far away look in his eyes. You know, I could just take us both over the edge now. He didn't say it as a threat, more like speaking a thought out loud. I will admit I panicked. But all that came out of my mouth was, "But why would you?" Then I did the most badass heroic thing I could think of to save my life. I sat down on a highway in the middle of a thunderstorm. Granted, our unit was right behind us, blocking traffic. Still, one of the worst things you can do in a violent situation is get on the ground while your attacker or potential attacker is standing. But in this one case, I figured it was a decent idea. Would make it much harder for this guy to grab me and throw me. So I look at him and say, "Let's keep talking." So for about the next 10 minutes, I'm sitting on cold concrete, drenched, talking to this guy. I finally talk him into coming with us somewhere to talk to someone. Very carefully I get up, and staying as far away from the edge as I could, I helped him to the unit. Nice guy. Hope he is doing alright. Can't say I was going to die, but it was definitely the most danger I was in that I know of. I was with a friend driving back from a concert festival, and we got to our hotel pretty late at night. There was nowhere to park, so we just parallel parked beside the hotel by its sidewalk. To my knowledge, that was the last spot available. As soon as we stop the car, a big white truck pulls up beside us, slows down, then speeds off. I didn't really think anything of it at the time, but I'm assuming this guy had wanted our spot anyhow. He had to park in an adjacent parking lot, an inconvenience to be sure, but ultimately whatever. He gets out of his truck and slowly starts walking towards us as we are gathering our things, and stop about 15 feet away from us. My buddy and I just kind of look at him, because I think we didn't think this person was going to actually confront us about it. So for context, we are in Frederick, MD, just two incredibly unremarkable white guys, and this is a rough looking dude of ethnicity I can't really remember, not white though. So anyways, here's my quote. I just sort of turned to my friend, and I'm like, are you going to take your pillow in or just leave it in the car for the night? I have no idea what he said, because I'm too focused on the dude. I'll never forget him pulling his gun up, and then just dismissing us, and dropping it away and behind him, sort of lazily pointed at us as he sighed and walked into the hotel. We both look at each other, and are like, was that a gun? What do we do? Do we call the police? So we walk around the building, and go to the front desk to check in, and get our keys, and, haha, the suspense waiting in the elevator was so intense, we were mashing the close the door button over and over again, so afraid this guy was gonna end up riding in the elevator with us. Thankfully he didn't. We didn't see him again, and his truck was gone by morning. TLDR might have been almost shot over a parking spot. This probably doesn't count, but still sends chills down my spine. I had just become clean from a massive crystal meth and heroin addiction, cleaned myself up, worked harder at landing a more stable income other than waiting tables, only did that for daily cash to get the fix. I had landed a sales job which required me to be a vendor in popular superstore selling satellite TV. Scrounged all the money I had for a nice suit, and went after it. One night arriving back at my parents' house in a gated community, I see a truck that I know does not belong to anyone in the community sitting in front of the box to open the gate. I pull up behind them, and they circle the entrance. Thinking they are just visiting relatives or something, I open the gate and head on in, and they follow quickly behind me, and head down the opposite street. I drive down to my parking space, gather my briefcase, and start walking to the house. Then I see them coming up the street towards me. This sprung red flags all over my mind. I start walking a little faster, keeping my eye on them to maybe get a plate number in case they are casing the neighborhood for a future break-in. They get close enough to see they flash on the brights, and I can't see shit. Commence even faster walk to the house as they pass me, and speed up to make a U-turn. I make it to the door fumbling my keys trying to get in the house, and out of getting mugged or killed, because I look like I may have money when at that point in my life I had nothing of value anyway. I make it in the house, just as they pull up, and lock the door ASAP. They then continue, and exit the neighborhood. The rush I felt that night made me think I had gotten back on drugs. Oh well, nobody is gonna read, but here it is. About 15 years ago I had to go to Mexico City for business. In the night I had a meeting at a restaurant with a client, so I took a taxi from the airport. I did not know anything about the city, so I just gave the driver the address and sit back. After about 40 minutes of driving I start to get this feeling of something going wrong. I was supposed to meet with businessmen, and I was seeing very sketchy parts of the city, so I asked my driver, and he said he was just gonna pick up a friend. Red faking flags, but I can't jump off the car. We stop at a terrible place, and he locks the doors with me inside. No way to go out. A police car stops behind us, and a man goes out of the backseat. The police leaves, and the taxi driver and the new guy pull out knives, and tell me to give them everything I have. I do, and they throw me into the backseat of the taxi. tell me they need more money and that they will take me to a place where you send and pick up cash, don't remember the name, and to call my family to send me cash. I call my wife, try to be calm, and explain her the situation. Of course she is nervous AF. I tell her to send me 3 grand, what we had available, and that I will call her as soon as I can. They drive me to that place, I give them the cash, and they put me back into the cab. They drove me to a terrible looking desolated area, and got out of the cab, me sitting inside. They are talking, and I hear the driver tell his companion to stab him, and drop him here. Full rush of adrenaline. As soon as they open the car door I go full kill, or be killed on them. I managed to beat the shit out of them, only suffering small cuts. Ran the fuck away to the nearest highway, and luckily for me a guy stopped and took me to his house, where I could call my wife and tell her to buy me a plane ticket out of here ASAP. TLDR fuck Mexico City, knowing Spanish can save your life. Playing pool at a local bar when one of the guys at the table next to me accidentally knocks his quarters on the ground. 2 of the quarters roll over to my feet. Being what I thought was a normal human being, I picked up the quarters and placed them on the round bar table between us. I go back to playing pool as it's my turn. About 2 seconds later I hear the guy ask, "Are you going to hand me my quarters?" It should be noted that I'm literally about to take my shot, so I'm not really paying attention to anything else at the moment. He asks again, louder this time. I stop and turn around. I'm pretty confused now, because multiple people at the other pool table had clearly seen me put the quarters down. I say something along the lines of, "Dude, your quarters are right there," pointing to the quarters that were right fucking beside him. He replies with, "I want you to hand me my quarters." As he says that, he pulls out a faking gun and points it at me. The pool table I was playing at was in the corner of the bar, so at this point only myself and the friend I was with can see the gun. Also, this was a local dive bar that I had never felt 100% safe in, so I don't take this as a joke or laugh. Also, this guy reminds me too much of Tuco from Breaking Bad, so all I can think about is Jesse getting his ass beat. I change my demeanor completely and act like there's nothing more in the world I would like to do than hand him his quarters. Then I find my fiancée at the other side of the bar and get the fuck out of there and had our wedding the next week. This is around 2005. I work nights and used to stay up all morning playing FFXI on my PS2. This one Friday was Dynamis, a huge raid type dealio that takes hours and many players. I'm staying up way past my bedtime and it's almost 11 o'clock. I hear some noise in the house. At that time, a shadow passes by the window shade. A big shadow. That means someone's like a foot away from the house. I look through the window and see an unfamiliar car park reverse in my driveway. I put down the controller and head toward the front door. Sure enough, some kid is just getting through the front door of my house. Couldn't have been more than 16 or 18. That was when I saw real youth. It's in their faces. Their eyes. So useless. So scared. I don't know why they chose my home that day. He was startled and is now struggling to stand up. Maybe he didn't expect anyone to be home, but that's dumb because it's daylight and my car is clearly in the driveway. Morons. He draws a gun, points it at me, and demands everything I got. I'm not a big dude, but I'm bigger than a scared child, and that's all that matters. I give him a chance to leave, but he doesn't take it. Instead, he makes his way to me and attempts to strike me with the butt of his gun on my right, dominant side. Big mistake. But me not being in this situation before was in disbelief that he was that stupid. Too easy, I thought. So I hesitated before I put my hand up to disarm and just block and push him away. Wrong move on my part. The idea is to close distance, not create. So there he is again, about 6 feet away with a gun pointing at me. As I stare him down, he's still frightened. Shaking, even. Time to choose. Kid. I hear a pop. I'd never heard a real gunshot before. Even with him standing in front of me, I swore it was a firecracker or that was a pop cap gun from back when I was a kid. Sure enough, I look down and see a small hole in my shirt. I look back at the shooter with disappointment and say, really? He went from scared to terrified and bolted out the door. I called the police, even though I knew nothing was going to come from it. In hindsight, I should have pursued whilst calling. Done something. Inexperience is a beach. Oh yeah. The bullet. It went through and stopped at my back. No exit wound. Barely an entrance wound. No blood. No pain. No regrets. I was attacked by a neighbor who invited me in his flat. He is an alcoholic and he invited me for a drink and I didn't want to be rude, so I joined in. We drank some drinks and suddenly he jumped on me with a big army knife. I got strong arms and hands from climbing, and I managed to get both of his hands in a tight hold. But the knife and its sharp edge was directly pointing into my face. He tried to put his whole weight on it to get the knife down right into me, but I could stand his try and started speaking to him. At this point it was like time has slow end, and I got so much thoughts on my mind. He was screaming understandable things to me, and his eyes went totally crazy. I thought about that whatever I do I will not get good out of this. If I kick his ass, and he gets hurt or even dies then I lose my job, that I really love and get arrested, and if I can't stand his attack anymore I get injured or even die. He had nothing to lose, because I wrecked his whole life up already. So I speak to him, and told him that I'm afraid, and told him about my 2 kids, and that the only thing I can think about is that I want to see them again. When my words reached his alcohol-soaked brain something must have happened, because the weight he put on the handle weakens a little. I used this chance and fused him down of me, and straight ran out of his flat. When I looked back, while I was escaping I saw him sitting on the floor staring at the floor, like he was paralyzed from that what just happened. I went into my own flat and was totally shocked for more than some days. I never told the police what was happening there maybe, because of the shock. He still lives there, but when he sees me, he doesn't say anything to me. I'm a pacifist, since I was born, but when he ever will come near to me again I swear I will beat the shit out of him straightly. I just talked to my best friend about this, and my feelings with it, but I think it's good to write about it, and thanks to the opener for this chance, at least I saw my kids again, and that's what matters. Greetings to all who made similar experiences. I was hiking deep in woods by myself. I know, dumb, but my buddy cancelled last moment and I went anyway, with my dog way off the popular trails on some small side trails, when I noticed this weird guy following me about 300 to 400 yards back. I got a bad feeling from him right away, so I went down a different side trail that no one would normally go down as it's barely marked and doesn't go anywhere, then jogged for a couple hundred yards. I stopped by a bend in the trail, then ducked behind a tree and took off my pack to get my hatchet out. Well, a few moments later this same guy comes around the corner looking around as if he's looking for me. We are about 8 miles from a road at this point and the guy is wearing a stained jersey, a filthy hoodie, some ratty jeans and dirty old tennis shoes. Not dressed like a backpacker. I step out from behind the tree, hatchet casually at my side in one hand, dog leash in the other. My dog is usually really sweet and loves attention from people, but clearly understood this guy was up to no good and started growling at him and getting into an aggressive stance. At this point the guy notices me and we lock eyes. He looks really agitated and a bit crazy and he starts moving toward me. I think he was so messed up on whatever drugs he was on that he hadn't noticed the dog or the hatchet yet, so I let out my dog's leash, move the hatchet around a bit to draw his eye, and say in as loud and commanding a voice as I can muster, "Hey man, you lost or something?" I guess his meth-soaked brain finally started working again to a degree, because that's when he seemed to notice there was a very angry dog standing at his feet giving him a eye-faking "Dare you look." He muttered something about trying to find the parking lot, so I gestured with my hatchet and told him it's about 8 miles in behind you. I could tell he was sizing us up for a few moments and trying to decide if it was worth it. After a really long pause he just turned around and started slowly walking the other direction. I found out from a ranger later that he got caught breaking into cars in the parking lot and had been threatening other hikers with a knife. On a different hike in the same park about a year later I ran into some jugglers who offered me free LSD. Shawnee National Forest is a beautiful, but really strange place. I used to work security at a train station in East Hastings, Vancouver, lovely area. Look it up /s. It shared a building with a Greyhound bus station. Thankfully, the Greyhound had its owner hired security, or contact was just to help them in emergencies. At the train station, there were many drug addicts who would try to set up camp and whatnot. Obviously, that wasn't allowed, so my job was to ward them off. There were times when people would flip shit out, sometimes threatening me with needless and stuff. Nothing a calm demeanor and police on the phone wouldn't fix, because law states that we can't carry weapons. Not a bad idea for mall cops, but East Hastings deserves an amendment. There were only 3 times I was actually fearful for my life, all of which involved responding to an emergency from the Greyhound station. One security guard there was extremely quick to power trip and constantly caused unnecessary spouts of violence. He was also racist, and would often say crude things under his breath, some of which would be caught by people, and then they would get angry. Anyways, Greyhound stations attract 2 types of people. People trying to save a dollar, and people who have very few dollars. The latter can be very aggressive. One guy went into a full-out fury of anger, punching and kicking the bus driver and this guard, who seems to have provoked him. Anyways, I had to juggle between a 911 call and trying to make sure that this crazy guy wasn't going to hurt anyone else. We had to pin him until police arrived. The bus left, and with no one to press charges, they let him go after a night in the think tank. This was made known to me later. The next day, while I was thankfully on a day off, the guy apparently came back and attacked the lady at the Greyhound ticket counter for not refunding the ticket for the bus he missed for going apeshit. If what my employer stuff was true, he was taken away by police and actually arrested, with the Greyhound ticket lady there to press charges. I went to school in Providence, Rhode Island. Senior year I lived off campus, which has some very rough areas and lots of gang activity. A nearby neighbor on my street was the head of a group of blood gang members. I actually was friendly with this guy. He had my phone number for some reason I don't know why. He was older and got out of that lifestyle, and he saved my ass one time. So here's the story. Neighbor across the street sold drugs. Like lots of drugs. Like my roommate bought weed from him, and during a transaction I saw baseball-sized bags of what was either coke or heroin. Heroin is very popular in that area now. So one Wednesday night I wake up at 3 AM to the loudest car bass I have ever heard in my life. I'm pretty immune to this as I listen to metal bands blasting on my stereo weekly. But this was on another level. My entire house was shaking. I had to be up early for a final exam, so I'm fuming mad and pumping with adrenaline, and I jolt awake in bed. I peer out the window to see a minivan parked outside. The rear hatch is open, and I see it full with subwoofers. Of course I just woke up, and am not in the right mind, and straight up walk outside barefoot in nothing but underwear. It is 4 to 5 Mexican dudes in front of the drug dealer's house across the street. I walk right up to these guys and ask them to turn the music down. The exchange went like this. Me, can you turn that down? Them, what? Me, can you turn that down? Them, what? Me, what are you talking about? Turn that down, it's 3 AM on a Wednesday. I'm starting to get angry. Them, you want us to turn it up? Me, lose my shit and start screaming. Them, they all pull knives on me and start surrounding me. Me, I start backing the fuck up and telling them to calm down and say I was upset and sorry. Then I run back inside my house so goddamn fast. Apparently not only is there a large blood gang in the area, but there is also a group of insane Mexican drug gangs as well. Who would have thought? I make it back inside, and in my heart feels like it's gonna burst out at my chest. What seems like 5 seconds later my cell phone rings. I don't recognize the number. Who could be calling at this time of night? It's the old head blood leader who lives down the street. He came outside when he heard the commotion. He informed me that he confronted the Mexican gang and they had planned to come into my house and shoot me. Little did they know I had a fucking R15 waiting for them, since I'm an avid shooter and I often drove an hour or so home to my nearby state to shoot with my father. I happened to keep my rifle with me at school since I was now off campus and nothing forbid this. Had only 10 or so rounds, since I only bought ammo at the range and never thought about needing to use it for self-defense. This is not a rifle you want to have to shoot inside. It would probably make your ears bleed. I thank the guy and hang up. So here I'm waiting in my house scared out of my fucking mind. I don't call the police, since I'm not sure it is legal for me to have this rifle over state lines. I don't feel like being ignorant of the law and getting in a fuck ton of trouble. Gun laws are complicated, and you can get faked by the law. I suddenly hear a loud pop 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 down the street. It's clearly gunshots, and the Mexican gang leaves, and cops are rolling down my street all night. Someone must have called in the gunshots. I sleep 0 hours after that, and I get a sheet grade on my test. I'm walking back from class, and I see the blood members in the street. He goes, "Did you hear me test out my new pistol into the air last night? I think I scared off those fuckheads for you." What the fuck? So that's how I got saved from a firefight. But an ex-blood member. Sometimes gang members aren't bad and are looking out for the innocent public. And that's my near-death story. I hung out with the wrong crowd when I was younger. Was nearly murdered for my car on 3 separate occasions. First time, I was dropped off in a trailer park with some guys I didn't know while my friend borrowed my car. A guy with a bunch of Aryan Brotherhood tattoos on his face offered me a hit of cocaine. That's when it occurred to me that if I leaned over I was going to get a moonroof in the back of my skull. Too many subtle backstory things to explain why I knew this, but I did. I refused the cocaine and acted like I had no idea they were supposed to murder me. Then my mom calls. I answer the phone casually. "Hey mom, Billy dropped me off at a trailer park in Largo." That's all I needed to say to get the guy to call it off. I had told my mom who I was with and where I was. The guy goes outside for a second to make a phone call, and Billy shows back up with my car. I yelled at Billy for smoking in it, and he mutters, "You're lucky to be alive, motherfucker." The second time, I was with some people who I just met. I was told we were getting out of the car to smoke a blunt. As we're standing there, the guy's inconspicuously pointing a gun at me and lightly tugging on the trigger. His gun didn't work. Later on that night we were all drinking, and he was bitching to his friend about giving him a crap gun. The third time requires a little backstory. I know a guy through family that has a reputation as the gangster other gangsters don't fuck with. He introduced me to these 2 black guys, and then a week later went to prison. I thought I was safe, because nobody is going to fuck with Chris. As it turns out, when Chris is in prison, his friends are fair game. These guys had me drive them around for 3 hours. We were just driving, while one smoked Black and Milds and the other was in the backseat smoking crack. They would not let me drop them off. They asked me if I knew any girls, so I said yeah. I drove to my house and said I'll go see if they're home. Went in, informed my mom of the situation. She pretended she was going apeshit because I did something wrong. They were adamant that they needed a ride home, but they never got the opportunity to get back in the car. The last story may or may not have been a murder situation, but I picked these guys up in the projects and they were sketchy enough to have me scared. Well, I spent a while typing up my dad's story only for my phone to sheet the bed, but I like this story enough to do it again. He was a college freshman going to Michigan Tech, way up in the Upper Peninsula, aka the middle of goddamn nowhere. Didn't have a car, so every day he hitchhiked to class. One day, a couple of locals pick him up, seem friendly enough, laughing as they drive, fun guys. But then he notices the laughter seems off. The guys are acting smug. They start saying they are going to beat him up. Have fun doing it. These are 2 youpers, younger than he is, stringy, but there are still 2 of them, and one of him. So dad, being, well, my dad, simply says he can take them. This confuses them, and they escalate. So does dad's attitude, like they're 2 scrubs, and he'll wipe the floor with them both. Now more confused and enraged, they pull over, undoubtedly to show him who's manlier or some shit. This is where the family semblance kicks in. Despite being a wrestler, runner, and in the peak shape of his life, dad runs into the woods like a scared rabbit. Like a bullet. Have to know when to run. Obviously, this pisses them off more, and the guys come thrashing into the woods, cursing and threatening, but he outstrips them. Finally, they give up and drive away. At this point, still like a scared rabbit, he lays in the bushes. He lays in those stupid bushes for hours, and for several hours, the car comes creeping by, the 2 hicks staring angrily into the woods. Needless to say, he didn't make it to class that day, did go right back to hitchhiking the next day, though. How else would I get to class? He said. TLDR, I was almost killed by 2 different boyfriends. I know, I had terrible taste in men when I was younger. My husband now is amazing, and the opposite of all the other douchebags I've dated. I've posted this before, but this is a short version. I had met a guy that was full of red flags. The relationship became physically, emotionally, and sexually abusive very quickly. I got pregnant and found out he was cheating on me. I moved out, but we were still talking. I, stupidly, told him that he could come to my town for the ultrasound of the baby. I had gone on vacation and was driving home from the airport. The airport is in his city, which is 4 hours away from my town. He asked if we could meet up. I agreed, and we met at a gas station. I wanted a public place. He got in my car and snatched the keys out of my ignition. He made all sort of threats to me, the baby, my new boyfriend. He even pretended to make a phone call that made it seem like he had friends outside my boyfriend's house. They were going to go in and kill him, so he said. I panicked and punched him in the face. He threatened me with the cops. I should have let him call. After begging, pleading, bargaining, and lying to him, he finally returned my car keys. As soon as he was out of the car, I put the pedal to the metal and was off like a flash. I was on my phone calling my boyfriend. He was fine and at work. The whole thing had been a lie. I was speeding down the interstate. I thought I'd lost him. Then, I see his car swerving in and out of traffic behind me. The speedometer climbs, 80, 90. My phone rings. It's Justin's mom. She's begging me to pull over. They are all just so worried about me and the baby. I'm too unstable to have a baby. I hang up, and my mother calls. I tell her what's happening. She hangs up, so I can concentrate. Meanwhile, Justin is swerving all over the road. He calls. I answer to tell him to leave me alone. He says he'll kill me before he lets anyone else have me or the baby. An overpass is coming. He tells me to make peace. He's going to run us both into it. I hang up and gun it. Somehow I managed to avoid a collision. There is an exit coming up. It's a tiny little town with no gas station, no public place, no police. I call him back. Tell him I'm sorry. I'm his. Just slow down and we'll pull over in the next big town. That I needed gas. If we go slower I'll pull over at the next town with a gas station. He buys it. He decides he's going to drive next to me so that I can't do anything funny. The little town's ramp is approaching. I yelled him so he'd have to look down at his phone. He doesn't. I take the ramp. He can't follow. I end up hiding in a cornfield for a few hours to make sure he can't find me. I call my loved ones, let them know I'm alright. After that I filed a protection order and haven't seen him since the court date, which was almost 10 years ago. I got a call from a friend of mine that had gotten himself in some trouble over drugs. He needed some cash to get out of town. I told him I had $40 and he could come get it. My boyfriend at the time worked overnights guarding a construction site. He overheard my conversation and got pissed. He couldn't believe I was helping out a guy and a drug addict. He was overcome with rage and we got in a huge fight. Next thing I know he's on top of me choking me. Everything went black. I came to as he was picking me up. He realized I was awake and threw me into the side of my truck. He put his hands back around my throat and told me that he could easily get rid of the body because we were in a construction site and it wouldn't be hard to find a hole to stuff me in. I just started to plead with him and promised not to do it again. He eventually let me go. I had some wicked bruising all over my neck and back after that. My fiance and I had been together for 4 years. A dream come true, really. Same interests, sexually compatible, even temperaments. Even my mother couldn't really complain, except for the fact that my fiance gamed even more than I did. One night, my fiance picked me up from work. It was late, sometime before midnight. He asked me if I wanted to go get dinner out and find a place to look at fireflies. Well, this was a little odd. We were living with my mother at the time, and she lived 5 minutes away from my countryside job with a big firefly-prone field in front of her house. The nearest food place opened this late was a 20-minute drive out of the way, but he seemed to just want some romantic time to ourselves, so I agreed. He asked me if Caledonia State Park would be a good spot to look for fireflies, and I said maybe. So off we went on an hour-long drive. On the drive up, he seemed kinda nervous. I chatted with him as usual, held his hand. I noticed that he passed by several cheap places. Eventually he stopped at an Italian restaurant. I was ready to sit down and relax to eat, but he asked for it to go. I was a little surprised by this. The restaurant was open for another hour. I shrugged it off, and we went on our way. He had me direct him at this point, as he wasn't very familiar with the area. We turned onto one of the roads that runs through a deeper part of the forest. We drove for another 2 miles, and then he pulled the car over. We had had no luck thus far finding fireflies, so I figured he'd given up. I started to pull my leftover box out of the back seat, thinking he wanted to eat here, but he stopped me by taking my hand. At this point, all sorts of nervous red flags are popping up in my brain. It's late. Mom was probably asleep when he left the house. He took us way out into the middle of nowhere. He pulled over in a desolate forest with no lighting in sight. But being the naive person I am, I give him the benefit of the doubt. There's no way, right? He's always treated me so well, loved me so much. He says something about how pretty the stars are, and of course I agree. Without the lights of civilization, they're pretty damn beautiful. Then we sit in awkward silence for a bit. A few minutes later, he asks me if I want to get out of the car. Being a complete bussy and a horror movie nut, I tell him no very firmly. I can't see shit out there, and besides, bears live in those woods. He asks me again, a bit more nervously. I again say no, no thanks. More awkward silence ensued. Another couple minutes pass. Catastrophic thinking has taken the fuck over at this point. I'm looking around, wondering if it's my day to die. Wondering how the hell I'm going to get out of this. Wondering what method he's chosen for me. Then I hear him reach into the back seat. And I hear metallic rustling. What the fuck does he have back there? He says to me that he really wishes I'd gotten out of the car, because now he has to do it in here. Do what? I asked with my heart in my throat. He pulls a tinfoil wrapped package out of the back seat and turns the overhead light on. Doesn't look dangerous, so my anxiety is temporarily calmed, but I'm still confused and debating on jumping out of the car after all. He starts talking about all the things we've done together and what the future holds. His voice is shaking. He brings up the fact that it's exactly 7/23 at 23:23 and I just turned 23 on the 20th. He takes the wrapping off of the cupcakes and proudly tells me he made them from scratch. There are 23 of them. There's something written on them, but I can't see what in the dim light. My favorite number is 23, so I got that much. But why all this? We'd already celebrated my birthday. What the fuck was going on? Then he pulls out a small black box and asks me a very specific question. I finally see the writing on the cupcakes. I gape. He took me out into the wilderness in the dead of night and tried to get me out of the car to propose to me. I burst out laughing and explained my logic for the past 2 hours. His pride seemed hurt, and though he laughed too, he was still anxious. What was my answer? I got out of being killed by saying I do. We are still together now, 9 years strong, but marriage hasn't been in the budget yet. I love this crazy sweet guy. TLDR, put a serious tag on your posts if you want a serious reply. Edit because formatting on mobile is hard. Super late to the party here, but this is one I can actually answer. Happened a good 8 or 9 years ago. I was walking home late, rural UK, from a friend's house, after having a night of gaming and smoking weed, so I'm pretty out of it at this point. To get home I have to walk past this really dodgy park that's completely unlit as other surrounding streets. It always gave me the heebie-jeebies, even more so after this incident. I hear a set of 2 footsteps behind me. They were walking pretty quickly behind me, and the footsteps were getting closer. When they were pretty much a few feet away from me, I decided to turn around. 2 very large guys wearing hoodies which were partially covering their faces were walking towards me. I could see very clearly that one of them had a knife in their hand, so automatically I reached for my wallet and told them I'll give you everything I have. Unfortunately they responded with nah mate, we're just gonna fuck you up. Faking chavs. Anyway, at this point my body automatically thought, fuck this shit, I'm out, and I just ran. Didn't even think about it, I just ran. Unfortunately they followed suit and were chasing me. Now, it felt like they were chasing me for miles, but it was only from one end of this creepy as park to the other. Fortunately I was faster than them and managed to keep one step ahead, but being somewhat of a stoner back then I was pretty damned unfit and knew I couldn't outrun them forever. I decided to make a sharp turn onto the driveway of a random house and into their backyard, creeping at this point, and hid myself behind the decking that was there, unbeknownst to me at the time. Being as short as I didn't actually set off the porch sensor light. I stayed crouched there for some time thinking that I'd managed to lose them and decided to shuffle back to the driveway to make my escape home. They'd obviously stuck around for a while and must have heard my shuffling on the gravel because they started to walk on the driveway towards me, which in doing so set off the automatic porch light. It was at this point that I did something very unusual for me. I had a light bulb moment, which in hindsight could have just as easily got me stabbed, but I deepened my voice and shouted as loudly as I could, "Who the fuck are you? Get off my driveway." I then heard some very frantic feet on gravel as the two guys legged it, picked myself up and ran back home, had another joint, and drank the fuck out of several cups of tea. An act I then had to repeat when I found out that two men matching their description were arrested several days later for stabbing an old man multiple times in the same park. TLDR, got chased by two chavs with a knife, who I'm guessing were the same people later arrested for murder, hid in someone's backyard, and pretended to be a very large occupant by shouting at them in a deep voice from said backyard, escaped home and drank tea. Was drinking with a buddy one night when we were 17. He passed out fairly early in the night, so I went to hang out with his mom and her friend upstairs. Pretty shortly after sitting down with them, my friend's mom was passing out. It was about 11 PM, so her friend, who was wide awake, invited me back to her place just down the road to hang out and keep drinking and talking. Me being a horny 17-year-old hoping to get with this older woman said fuck yay, and we went to her place. After a few hours of drinking and her playing hard to get, we ended up passing out on her couch at around 3 AM. Around 4 AM, it is pouring rain outside and her, unbeknownst to me, boyfriend and his friend, who are both known local gangbangers, bust in through the back door all coked up screaming, "Who the fuck am I? And what the fuck am I doing there?" Her boyfriend then proceeds to pull a revolver from his pants and points it directly at me while screaming still. After about 5-10 minutes of screaming, she's able to pull her boyfriend away to the bedroom, where she is trying to explain who I am and what's not going on, but all I hear from the living room is him shouting over her and him slapping the shit out of her. His friend was calmly questioning me, and I'm explaining to him that I'm her friend's son's friend and was just hanging out drinking, cause my friend passed out. I know, confusing. After a few minutes of this, he finally believes me, explains this to his friend with the gun in the bedroom, and then she emerges from the bedroom saying she's gonna drive me back to my friend's really quick, thankfully getting me the fuck out of there. Definitely thought I was gonna die at the hands of a coked up Hispanic gangbanger that night. Went out for St. Patty's Day in Milwaukee in the midst of all the black on white mob beatings happening in the city. Friends and I were all sauced up at bar time walking off the main drag towards our apartments. All of a sudden this car screeches the brakes in the crosswalk right by us. 5 black men get out and start walking behind us as if they wanted to catch up to us. All of a sudden, I feel a heavy object whack me in the back of my head. It knocked me out for a second. I get up to see a full-on brawl. My friends decided to stay and fight as we had 4 girls with us. One of them is now my wife. The girls ran off screaming, and we were still in a scuffle. I had been a football/rugby player my whole life, so defending myself physically something I'm capable of. A rage came over me, and I speared on the guys into the street and started bashing his face in. Then I feel a sucker punch in the back of the head, and hear whoa whoa whoa, gun drawn, right at my forehead. I'll never forget the heavy hatred in the guy's eyes. He wanted to shoot me right then and there. It was the longest 20 seconds of my life, but still a blur in ways. I remember thinking, this is it. I thought about my girlfriend, now wife, and my parents, and said goodbye to them in my head. I remember there being a feeling of peace, as if I had accepted this is how I was going to go. In the distance we heard sirens. It was enough to startle the gunman, but he had this shoot this guy now or never look to him. I told him, dude, if everyone leaves now nobody dies and nobody goes to jail. He spit at me and they took off. We stayed and waited for the cops. Funny thing is one of them dropped their wallet during the scuffle. I took it and didn't let the cops know I had it. As much as I wanted to see this guy caught, he let me live. Had the wallet for a few months after, but ended up burning it in a bonfire as it had become a pretty haunting artifact. That night changed my life. I don't deal well with strangers or people approaching me as a result. I probably wasn't really going to get murdered, but I did think something bad was about to go down. But probably not at all. It was late at night, and me and a girl I met at a bar were walking home. It was probably like 2 AM, and the roads were pretty empty. It was cold, and the walk was like 20 plus minimums back to my apartment. As we were walking, a big black SUV comes up, and the window rolls down, and a very large, intimidating black man calls us over to his car. I was drunk, and go right on over. Meanwhile the girl I'm with is worried about me doing something stupid. The guy asks for directions. I get all excited, because where he's going, my apartment is on the way. His truck is huge, so I go, I can show you how to get there if you give us a ride to my apartment. The girl I'm with actually yelps, and the guy in the car goes, sure, hop in. So, I go in, as if there's nothing wrong, and the girl slowly follows me. Inside the car are 2 other very scary men, also black. At this time, I realize why the girl is probably scared. So, being the tactician I am, I say, hey, just so you know, we are both well-off white people. If anything happens to us, it'll definitely make the news. All 3 guys bust out laughing, thinking I'm the funniest guy on earth. They drive us home and thank me for the directions. The girl was scared shitless the whole time and apparently had 911 dialed on her phone, just waiting to hit send. I used to sell a little bit of weed in college. Not a lot by anyone's standards, just enough to satisfy the gram and eighth buyers, usually only friends of mine. This one time I agreed to sell a bag to a guy who was a friend of a friend. He was requesting a quarter ounce. He shows up at my apartment with a friend. Should have been a red flag, and my roommate was gone, so I was home alone. I invite them in, and I go to get the bag I had previously weighed out, which was in a safe in my bedroom. As I'm walking in to get it, the buyer says, would you mind throwing an extra gram in there for me? I said sure. I come out with a bag and this motherfucker pulls out a gun from his waistband and says, hand it over buddy. I looked at him and giggled, and then sat down on my couch, put my feet up on the coffee table, and politely said no. Little did this kid know, I'm absolutely sheeting my pants on the inside, but decided to be brave and call his bluff for some reason. At this point I decide to perform an ocular pat down, and I notice a university ID card sticking out of one of the kids' pockets and I realize these kids are students. No way are they going to do anything. I look at the friend of a friend and say what the fuck dude, and he goes, that's just how it goes man. And I said, no, that's not how it goes. People come in here with money, pay me, and I give them weed. That's how it goes. No one comes in here and pulls a gun on me. At this point the gun wielder says, so you aren't going to hand it over? And I looked him square in the eyes and said not, unless you are going to shoot me. And I stood up from the couch and said I think you guys should leave before something bad happens. Then I gently started shoving them toward the door and they reluctantly moved toward the exit. I get them through the doorway, and as I'm slamming it in their face, one of them says well can I at least get a gram? LMAO. Faking pussies. The 2 of them could have came in my place and beat the shit out of me and taken everything I owned. But instead, they tried to be hard-ass with a gun they never intended to use. I just sat back on my couch, loaded up a huge bong, and contemplated how stupid I was to risk my life for $100 of weed. Just do it. Then my dad will finally believe me. 7-year-old me to my father's girlfriend. My father's girlfriend was insane, and she lived with us out in the country while I was 6 to 7. She hated me and seemed to have a goal of making him hate me as well. It was clear she did not want me in their life. Dad was a truck driver and was out on the road most of the time. So whenever he would get back for a night, she would yell at him and make up a bunch of stuff I had done wrong and make him discipline me. She would even tell him he hadn't done enough and needed to hit me more, etc. She may have gotten off on it because they would go have sex after. It started with little stuff like his teachers are calling me again when they weren't. He won't listen to me. He was cussing and saying that he didn't care what I said cause you wouldn't do anything about it. It started getting worse. She wouldn't feed me for a few days, then tell him I wouldn't eat. She would break stuff and say I did it. Then she'd got dark. Real faking. Dark. She would hurt herself and say I kicked/scratched her. She would beat the shit out of me and tell him I got into a fight at school. She bound my hands and tied me to a tree overnight, then showed him my soiled pants and said I was defecating myself. She kept telling him when is enough going to be enough? When are you going to man up and send him off to his grandparents? Which I was praying for, but he kept rejecting and saying he could handle it. They got in a huge fight. Next, she started killing animals and blaming it on me. She started with my 2 cats. She drowned them in our above ground pool. Then she broke the neck of one of his favorite birds. Finally one day I'm hiding in a cardboard box pretending I'm a rabbit. I did what I could to escape reality and her line of sight when she kicks the box over and hands me a tiny cup, telling me to pick up all the tiny specks of dirt/paper etc. off the floor. A couple hours later, she walks by and digs her heel into my thigh, causing me drop the cup. You faking worthless idiot, as she turns around and storms to their room. She comes back with my dad's revolver, digs her heel into my chest, puts the gun to my head and cocks it. Give me one faking reason why I should just kill you right now. Then I said the line I started this post with. She paused, scowled at me for a second, said some hateful shit, then went and put the gun up. When my dad got home and I got him alone, I told him what she had done. Now normally he wouldn't believe me, but this time, part of the story stood out. He went to look at his gun, which was still cocked. I'll never forget the look on his face. He beat the shit out of her. Worse than 19 years ago, when The Undertaker threw mankind off Hell in a Cell and plummeted 16 feet through an announcer's table. Just kidding. Unfortunately, this actually happened. Dad took me out of school and we went on the road for a week or so, probably to avoid the cops. When we got back, she had killed all the animals there, over 100 birds, pheasants, quail, peacocks, rabbits, rip spirit animal, etc., and burned all of his shit. I went to live with the grandparents, and all charges were dropped for him. As for the demon lady, she got like 30 days in jail and community service for the animal killings. Never went to jail for anything she did to me. I really couldn't tell you why this wasn't pursued, but I do remember being coached to testify. I was just happy she was gone. She ended up having some mental illness, Huntington's or something, and got in more trouble with the law, but I do not recall details. I don't speak to the father anymore, and honestly, life is pretty swell now, in case you were wondering. Thanks for reading. It was my 14th birthday. My friends all picked me up and smashed my face in the cake, so I chased one down with cake to get him back. We ended up circling around to a dirt alleyway behind my house, which was between other houses in a typical safe, suburban neighborhood. Nothing shady about it. I walked those dirt roads all the time. The guy who lived about 5 doors down from me walked out of his house's back door with a shotgun. This guy was roughly 5 feet 10, wearing shorts that ended slightly above his kneecaps, a white wife beater, was maybe 250 pounds, balding, with a goatee and beard. The most disturbing part of it was he had facer paint on resembling that of Captain Spaulding's from The Devil's Rejects, perhaps even the same exact face paint. Keep in mind, I live in the south, so his accent was even quite similar. He accused us of vandalizing his house, claiming we looked like the same punks from earlier, whom he was referring to I have no clue. He cocked his shotgun and got closer to us. We had our hands up. I just simply said, nope, wasn't us man. He then became heavily irritated, getting even closer, and put the shotty in my face. I remember the smell of the steel even. He started screaming profanity at us, telling us that he knew it was us all along and that we better pray to God before he kills us. I again said, "No man, you got the wrong people. Promise, and I'm not a liar." He then just told us if he saw us again he was going to faking shoot us and drag us into his basement to kill us in the slowest way possible. I wonder if it was the promise that convinced him. Because fuck that guy, it was totally us who vandalized his house. Not really, just kidding. But true story. Was eating my muffin and drinking my coffee at my local diner when some chucklehead decided he'd rob the diner. Eventually after making the rounds he made it to me. I shocked my mouth off and he sat down next to me with his gun pointed at me and I told him, "There's a passage I got memorized. Ezekiel 25:17. The path of the righteous man is beset on all sides by the iniquities of the selfish and the tyranny of evil men. Blessed is he who, in the name of charity and goodwill, shepherds the weak through the valley of the darkness, for he is truly his brother's keeper and the finder of lost children. And I will strike down upon thee with great vengeance and furious anger those who attempt to poison and destroy my brothers. And you will know I am the Lord, when I lay my vengeance upon you." Now, I've been saying that shit for years. And if you ever heard it, that meant your ass. You'd be dead right now. I never gave much thought to what it meant. I just thought it was a cold-blooded thing to say to a motherfucker before I popped a cap in his ass. But I saw some shit this morning made me think twice. See, now I'm thinking. Maybe it means you're the evil man, and I'm the righteous man. And Mr. 9mm here, he's the shepherd protecting my righteous ass in the valley of darkness. Or it could mean you're the righteous man, and I'm the shepherd and it's the world that's evil and selfish. And I'd like that. But that shit ain't the truth. The truth is you're the weak. And I'm the tyranny of evil men. But I'm trying, Ringo. I'm trying real hard to be the shepherd. There's been twice. I didn't know if either of them were planning to kill me, but I know their intent was malicious, and I would have, at the very least, been hurt. First was during the Riverbend Festival in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I don't really care to go into Riverbend, but on the last night they have an awesome fireworks show, and I like to try to watch it from somewhere. My best friend and I went up on the hill that had a gravel lot at the top of it, and lots of people were parked there to watch. The trees looked like they would block a lot of the view, so we walked about 30 yards down this utility road to a clearing where we could see better. We kept hearing rustling down the trail and my friend kept shining a flashlight down there, but we heard nothing. The fireworks started and had been going on for about 30 seconds, and we heard a noise right beside us. My friend shined her light again, and a man was standing about 6 feet from us, trying to sneak up on us. He tried to play it off and was like, "Whoa, I didn't see you there." We went back up the trail and he was following and saying things like, "If I hurt you nobody would know. You don't even know my name." There were two men standing at the top of the trail watching the fireworks. We got to them and told them this guy was threatening us and trying to sneak up on us, so they told us to stand with them and they'd walk us to our car. It was really unsettling that he waiting until the fireworks started when nobody would hear us. Next was an unhinged ex. We had been broken up for a couple of weeks. He was drunk and broke into my house in the middle of the night. I woke up to him crawling on top of me and trying to kiss me. I pushed him off of me and told him to leave, and he just stood there and glared at me and started coming towards me. I started yelling and told him that I was going to wake my family up. I still lived with my dad. He had me cornered and was still staring at me breathing heavy like a creep, and I just kept repeating that I was going to wake someone up and he was going to be in trouble. He finally backed off and I walked him to the front door. He stood there and said he wouldn't leave until I kissed him. So I gave him a kiss and he tried to turn it into a super gross makeout session. I pushed him off of me and he finally left. I locked the door and woke my dad up and told him what happened. We tried to find how he got in. He had found the spare key hidden outside and let himself in. Back in 2011 I moved from Indiana to Utah to live with my sister, her husband and 3 kids. They also had another roommate. Well, about the time I got down there my sister was thinking about divorcing her husband. This was nothing new. He's a deadbeat and she has tried to leave him a bunch of times before. but she always took him back. Well, at this time she met someone she worked with and started faking around with him behind her husband's back. Then one day she told her husband that she wanted a divorce and told him to move out. So he did. Then one night that guy that she was messing around with came to the house. Well, that roommate saw and told her husband about it. So the next morning he came over and was super pissed that some random dude was around the house and his kids. He started to yell at my sister and started hitting her. I was asleep for that part, but I got woken up when he kicked open the door and pointed a gun to my face. It was literally 6 inches away. What a way to get woken up. He starts screaming at me to make sure that no other guy comes around his kids. I put my hands up and said, okay, I'll make sure. He then kept pointing the gun at me for what seemed like forever. Then he put the gun down and ran. But the cops were already on the way and he got arrested. But he was in jail for like 3 months. And the shitty thing is that my sister took him back and is still with him. I hated that for a long time. But eventually he moved back in and it was so awkward. I told her that I didn't want him around, but she wouldn't listen. It was shitty situation. I was once fishing with my best mate and his younger brother, who was also a very good friend, as far as crazy nutfuck with a temper to behold might be. We'd fought a few times. He'd probably got into a fight every 5 to 6 weeks. He had major problems with his anger. Once you get to see the signs, he was easy to be around. Until we went fishing. Him and his brother were having an argument. Little bro had lost his line to reeds. He was fuming. He started getting wound up. As per the usual, just let him be a little while. If he needs help, he'll ask and all is sweet. His brother had other ideas. Namely, call him out for getting worked up over something so stupid. Faking genius this guy. They fought with words for a while. A veritable whirlwind of fuck you. And I'm gonna knock your faking teeth out. Yeah, dirty little. Censored. Then, big bro threw the little bro's fishing rod in the water in his own little bout of rage. I'm sitting there, thinking, oh, for fuck's sake. I get up. I throw myself between them. They both back off. Then to show them the path of righteousness and dignity, I swam out for the fishing rod. Aren't I a paragon of selflessness? I returned to shore, sopping wet. I smelled like ass. And my underwear is no longer comfortable. Little bro, cool as you like. The fuck you doing, you dirty fuck potato elephant fuck nut. Paraphrasing. And he pulls out his utility knife. I'm not looking at it, but I know what it is. I've seen the kid do it a few times. His bro would run. His dad would sit down. His mom would scare the living shit out of him. Me. What did I do? Look, omitted. Don't even start with this sheet. And he tries to stick his knife into my chest. Fortunately, he didn't open his utility knife. Instead, he stabbed me with a set of broad pliers in the arm. In my panicked death throes, unsure if I'd been stabbed, I put him on his ass with a well-timed ninjutsu staff spin. Reed flailed like a beach with a carbon fiber fishing pole. I walked off while his bro joined me, seeing if I need medical attention. How the story ended, for anyone foolish enough to have kept reading. I left them to fish. Big bro joined, packing up most of his gear. I didn't hear from either of them for a couple weeks. They'd went on holiday about a week later. One fine Monday, I get a knock on the door. It's little bro. He has a bigger box in his hand, 2 slightly smaller boxes at his feet and a sullen look on his face. First time, in all the time we knew each other, he apologized for his anger, handed me the boxes, apologized to my mother and left. He'd brought me a peace offering of a shisha pipe, plus about 100 boxes of various favored tobacco to go with it, a mutual hobby of ours, before we got into fishing. He never popped by after that. I was still fuming for about a month, but I got in touch. He apologized again, thanked me for not getting him done over by my family or the fuzz, and we started hanging out again. Respected the hell out of the dude after that. I mean, he really tried. He was chill around me from that point forth and soon after, got himself sorted out anger-wise. We don't speak anymore. We grew apart after a time. He got his act together, functions really well, and is one of the most chill people around, according to his family. Love the little bastard. TLDR, I tried to talk my way out of getting stabbed, I failed. I took a set of pliers, what my friend thought was a utility knife, to the forearm. I survived through sheer bravery and determination alone, not to mention my own immortality. I just said begone, mortal, and set myself on fire. My dad taught me no one fucks with crazy if they can help it. If you want out of a fight, just convince them you're crazy and they'll back out. Since learning that, bluffing has saved my ass many times. I was a magician at the time and was heading to a gig with my new assistant. Part of my act involved reaching through a flame, having my arm catch fire, and calmly putting it out. A guy came out of nowhere, actually probably somewhere, but I'm not sure, and pointed a gun at us. My dad also taught me that if you're mugged, just give them the money. It isn't worth risking your life. That's exactly what I was going to do, until he started ogling my assistant, and inching closer to her. I quickly palmed my lighter and lit it, spreading a flame along my right arm. I extended it towards him, so the spreading flames took up as much of his field of vision as possible, and shouted in the deepest voice I could muster, begone, mortal. Before you think I'm clever for thinking that up on the spot, I had actually used that same routine and a mask to scare friends before. I was scared shitless, and couldn't have thought of that, or any other plan at the time. I could have sworn I pissed my pants, but they were dry when I checked. And if you want to know how I set myself on fire safely, not all fires burn hot. There are plenty of substances which burn at around room temperature. I just coated my sleeve in one. The initial spark from the lighter burns, but it's so brief I barely felt it. Do not try this at home or anywhere else. You'll see on YouTube that hand sanitizer burns at low temperature. It'll still burn you over time. I used a very special chemical and, even so, I had to be very careful with it. I was living in Monterrey, Mexico back in 2009, when it was really dangerous thanks to narcos fighting each other, kidnapping, and just murdering people at random. I won't ever forget this experience, as it's the closest I've ever been to being murdered, that I'm aware of. I was going to visit a friend around 3 p.m, so I took a cab from the park near the Itism, a prestigious university I did not attend, and just had to take a main avenue and then make a right to connect me to his neighborhood. As we came down on the avenue, there was this roadblock made by 15-year-old to 20-year-old guys with large rifles, gold chains, gold rings, real chalas. They basically were stopping everyone as a control point, and when it was our turn, the guy basically noticed I had an accent from another city, so he pointed the assault rifle at me and asked me what I was doing here. I said studying, and he basically just pointed the gun at the floor, asked for my university ID, showed it to him, and he instructed us to keep it moving. Mind you, it might not look as if they were going to murder me, but people were dying at an alarming rate in that city at that time, all because these guys have firearms, drug money, and are basically instructed to cause pain into the city. I also knew a couple of people who vanished in similar situations, just living their life and going about their day. Never hear back from them, and a couple of friends who were shot in their cars just because narcos thought they were somebody else. I grew up in kind of a rough area. Gangs were big, drugs were prevalent, and just about every other guy on the street was packing. Given that just about everyone was in a gang, I had at least one friend in each of them. Well, one day, one of my buddies gets shot. He wasn't a small guy, so all his fat ended up saving his life, but he was kind of a mentor to the younger guys, and so they were understandably upset. One of them was a particularly hot-headed little thug who we'll call Jack. Now, as I said, I had friends in every gang in the city, including in the gang the shot came from. Jack doesn't know me, but he's seen me hanging around with rival bangers, and he figures that I, as the skinny white boy that I was, would probably make for an easier target for revenge. So he gets himself a gun, drinks a bit to work up his courage, and follows me into a public restroom at a park one night, while I'm hanging out with a few friends. So there's me, just trying to wash my hands after taking a piss, when Jack walks in, wavers for a bit, then pulls his piece and jams it in my chest, talking about how I faked up bad and it's my own fault for running with the crew I was with. This was not actually the first time I'd had a gun on me, though it was the first time anybody had pointed one at me with the explicit intention of murdering me. So I asked him if he'd ever shot anyone before. He hadn't. I stepped forward to press the muzzle right into my chest and asked him if he knew about minimum safe operating distance for a handgun. He gave me a weird look and I grabbed his hand, jammed my thumb behind the trigger, and smashed his wrist against the sink until he let go of the gun. Took it from him and ran. Threw the gun in the river and never saw him again. When my buddy got out of the hospital he told me he took care of it. I don't want to die. I was 16 and was taking the bus home. I was hanging with a friend at the mall and missed my first bus. And since it was a Sunday I had to wait an hour until the next bus came. My parents' car was broken at the time, so public transportation it was. I wasn't too thrilled, since now it was almost 7 p.m. and it was getting dark fast. I had just gotten off one bus to transfer to another and was waiting at the stop when this drunk belligerent man stumbles up. I get a little nervous because I'm an anxious person by nature, but he sits at the other end of the bench, so whatever. He had a paper bag with a long can of something boozy clutched in his hands and he eventually makes small talk, but he's so drunk and has such a thick Scottish accent that I don't understand him. Well, apparently, "Excuse me sir, I didn't catch that," was somehow offensive, so he lunges at me brandishing a switchblade he pulled from God only knows where. I failed my perception check there, so I couldn't tell ya. So now I have a 40-something drunk Scottish man with a blade to my throat and my shirt is drenched from his drink. He says something else and all I really make out are a few words, but I make out enough to know that he thought I was poking fun at him. I whimpered I don't want to die, like the brave teenager I was, and then we stared into each other's eyes for a few moments. To me it felt like hours, but it was probably not even 30 seconds. He lets go of me and just stumbles off, blade in one hand and a Mike's Hard Cherry lemonade in the other. Thankfully my bus pulled up like 10 minutes after that. My story is really just a series of completely separate events which ended up helping me out in the end. So, as any teenager was, I was a knife enthusiast. It's spring and still kind of cold, so I'm wearing my big wool overcoat going to a local cutlery shop. I find an awesome WWII British Commando dagger and I'm in love. I fork out $80 for this thing and after admiring it for a while, slip it into my coat's inside pocket and make my way home after some more boutique shopping. I take off my coat when I get home, leave the knife in the pocket, and after many days of warm weather thereafter and subsequently not wearing the coat, I forget the knife is there. Fast forward some months late May, and I believe I've just stupidly lost the knife. Furthermore, it's prom night at my high school. Now the weather was pretty warm, but the coat looked good with my suit, so I soldiered through the heat of it. Prom goes well, the after party was fun. Now it's 1 o'clock I sham, and I'm going home on foot. Decide to shortcut through Unlit Park, paying no mind to the shady character over at the picnic tables. I have to pass by this guy, and as I do he shouts, "Hey, hold up." I'm a naive teen that thinks they're invincible, so I figure he just wants a cigarette or something. I never said I was a good teen. He gets up to me and demands I give him my wallet and phone, or he'll mess me up. Now he hasn't presented a weapon, but given I'd never been robbed before, he cold sat, that point said boo, and my belongings would be in his hands. Here's where the luck comes in. I had put my wallet and phone into my coat's inside pocket, without putting my full hand in, placing just the end of the items into the pocket, then letting gravity to the rest, so I still had never realized my knife was in there. I go into my inside pocket all the way, and feel a handle. In the mix of adrenaline, fear, and confusion, it didn't even register that it was my knife. The only thing I thought was taking it out of my pocket, as it was in the way of my wallet and phone which I was supposed to hand to the kind gentleman. After brandishing the knife, almost unknowingly, albeit, he just turned around and fast walked away. I didn't understand why until I took a hard look at what exactly was in my hand and just counted my lucky stars. TLDR, bought a knife, forgot it in my coat. A few months later I was wearing the same coat, and the knife saved my phone/wallet. One time while living in Nashville I was at a gas station, and before I could get out of my car a random stranger entered my unlocked passenger side car door while I was putting a rain jacket over my head. I didn't see him coming, Because it was raining so hard, I had no time to react. He requested that I drive off, and I had to think fast. I tried to remain calm as I decided to leave the gas station with him. Later I realized how foolish this was, and as you will see, it almost cost me my life. He proceeded to give directions towards a destination, all the while asking me questions like whether I had any family that lived in the city, or if I was supposed to meet up with anyone for the evening. I have been around sketchy/suspicious people before, but never have I ever felt such a sense of urgency and awareness to danger. I was desperately looking for a way to escape. Quickly, we ended up in a very dangerous part of the city. At one point he made me stop by an ATM and withdraw money. This is where it gets interesting. While leaning in to get the money from the ATM machine, I got this intense feeling that something terrible was about to happen. As soon as I got the money, for whatever reason I pushed it back in the car towards the man without looking back in his direction. I braced for the worst kind of impact. Also, I was sure to leave my credit card in the slot with the menu still open and freely accessible. I stated that I just wanted to leave, and that he could do whatever he wanted with my account. He let me go. I called the cops immediately afterwards. The strong feeling of dread that came over me while withdrawing the money did not leave until later the next day. 2 days after filing the report, the cops were able to get the ATM footage, and I was invited to come watch it and ID the man captured on camera. I will never forget seeing the moment where I reach for the money, and at the same time he pulls out a large knife from his right sock, bringing it very close to me. It looked like something straight out of a movie. I hand the money over, place my hands on the steering wheel, tremble looking forward. I offer to let him take over the ATM situation, and ask to leave. He puts the knife away, and I'm gone. I never saw the weapon. Sucks losing money as a graduate student, but I'm happy to have not been hurt. Also, they were able to catch the guy later, so that's a happy ending. Happened about a year ago, when I was 16 years old. I was hanging out with my friends, and then decided to walk home with another friend at around 11 PM as we lived like 2 streets away from each other. We were walking home, and then we passed his house and he went in, and we both said bye, and I continued to walk to my house. About 1 street away from my house, a car pulled up by me, and I hear a girl driving the car yell, "Beat his ass, babe," and 2 guys pull out of the car, one with a crowbar and the other with a gun. This entire time I honest to God thought it was like a prank or some shit. So they got all up in my face pointing the gun at me, and my dumb ass, still thinking it's a joke, let out a light giggle. The guy with the crowbar proceeded to hit me on the head with it, which surprisingly didn't hurt at all because of the adrenaline which overcame my body upon its impact. Then they start beating my ass, and I'm on the ground, and start thinking, oh shit, this isn't a prank. I stop for a second and demand I give them all the money I had. I laid there on the ground and said word for word, "Are you guys faking serious? I'm faking 16 years old. You guys really think I carry around money? What the fuck, I'm broke as shit." They stared at me a bit confused and then just ran back into the car and drove off. Lucky for me, this all happened on a family friend's front lawn which had cameras all over the house. I went into their house and explained what happened. The dad of the house got in his car and drove around the neighborhood to see if he could find the car that did it. I stayed in there and we called the cops, but we were never able to find who it was, sadly. Just glad I got out of there with nothing more than a bump on my head. My parents have the video from the cameras of me getting jumped, but refuse to show me since they don't want me to relive it. I used to have a small job delivering food for a burger joint. I had a moped and I knew my way around the area, so it was pretty easy money. One day after I finish up my deliveries, I decide to take a shortcut through a rather rough and scary neighborhood to get back home. I figured it'd be really short so there wouldn't be a problem. As I'm at a red light waiting for it to turn, I get a quick text from my boyfriend about a project we were doing. As I'm texting 4 dudes around my moped, I look up from my phone and realize, oh shit, I might die. These were not small guys either, muscular, tall, and each had a machete. Well, at 5'3" I'm by no means a fighter, and as a girl I'm pretty concerned that I'm probably going to get killed, raped, or mugged. Possibly all 3. One guy grabs my handlebars and the other start walking closer. The guy grabbing my handlebars has the faking as whole East sneer and says, "Who ya texting their sweetheart?" To which I reply, "My boyfriend." "Oh really? Yeah, boyfriend have a name? At this point they're really close, and I'm panicking, because I have no idea what to do. No mace, no gun, no knife, just this short tiny girl on a moped. So I panic, and say his name, not going to say it here, since he doesn't like me sharing his name. The would-be murders turn pale and the guy holding my handlebars releases them like they're made of fire. In a stuttering voice the guy in front stutters out. You're his girlfriend? Yeah. At which point I showed him my phone which had a picture of him in his contacts. Guys around me start sprinting like hell is at their heels. Guy in front drops to his knees and starts apologizing, before running away as well. Later on I found out my boyfriend used to work around there. He got harassed a lot, before he ultimately kicked their ass. Twice. To a pulp. Apparently he broke their legs, and their ribs, while giving them a black eye, before throwing them into a dumpster. It was a Friday night around 2 AM. I was leaving the bar with a girl I was with and her friend, when a guy walked up to us with a gun. He points it at the girl's friend, and tells us to give him all our stuff. So I'm standing in the middle of the two girls. He has the gun pointed at the friend. We're all very drunk and the girls are surely terrified. I on the other hand don't comprehend the situation. While he's looking at the girl reaching into her purse to give him her stuff, I reach out, grab the gun, and just yank it out of his hand. Everybody freezes, shocked by my action. I'm holding the gun pointed at the ground not really realizing what I just did. The guy is just standing there with a confused look on his face. And the girls are just frozen in shock. The guy reacts first, turns around, and runs away. The girls start screaming. The adrenaline is high, and they're alternating between telling me how brave that was, and how crazy/stupid I am. I'm so drunk, I'm just standing there still holding the gun, and trying to figure out how to salvage the situation and still get laid. I wipe my prints off the gun with my shirt, because I saw it on TV, and figured it was a good idea, and toss it into a trash can. I wish I could say that I took both those girls home afterwards, and had an amazing threesome. But in reality they were so frightened/excited by the situation that it completely killed the sexually charged mood. They left, I went home and jerked off. It does make for a crazy story that all my friends have now heard countless times. Shout out to Tequila. I was 21, 07 feet, getting off work. One of my employees, she wanted to go get a beer at a local bar down the street from my house. Was 10 PM. Why not? I agreed. A block later in this big parking lot, hardly any cars, we are maybe 100 yards from this bar, when all of a sudden we see this black Cadillac circle us. After they circled us for the third time, 3 men get out of the vehicle, one of which took his shirt off and was hopping around. He reaches down in his waistband and draws a gun. They held me and my employee up at gunpoint, took her purse and money, had my ID and money in her purse. He then proceeded to fight me for my phone. At the time I was on the phone with my business partner who was telling me at the time one of our employees he just witnessed got hit by a vehicle. Hit and run. I guess, you can say I was too distracted to really care about the Cadillac, because I was already concerned with our other employee getting hit by the car. So back to the man with gun. As I'm talking I see him draw the gun. I then start screaming. He then put the gun to my head and says give me a faking phone bitch. We were struggling. I know looking back was stupid. I didn't give a fuck though. I proceeded to tell him to shoot me, and he was a faking coward bitch. Next thing I hear is the gun jam. So the asshole was attempting to shoot me, but my employee and I know the gun had jammed, and he looks down and was fidgeting with it. Few moments later people from the bar start coming out and can hear and see the commotion. Now the other 2 robbers were telling him come on we gotta bounce. I would not say he saved my life. I feel God had a hand in the situation and protected us from whatever was taking place that night. Phoenix, as is where this took place. Streets 67th and Thomas. Bullshit. So glad I moved. Nothing that severe, but I do have a couple of stories from when I did a semester abroad in London in 2003. Story 1. During a holiday break in London, I went to Rome for a couple of days and was staying in a hostel since I was a poor student. The first morning there, I woke up before dawn and went walking around the city, saw the sun rise over the Colosseum, then decided to take a walk along the river. As I'm walking along the river, I notice an encampment underneath one of the bridges. All of a sudden a mutt charges out from the encampment and begins barking at me. I'm near the stairs, but there's no way I can outrun the dog. Was wearing cheap loafers, and it had rained the night before, so the stonework along the river was slippery. So, I did the only thing I could think of, be the alpha dog. I put my hands in front of me in a defensive posture, and began to growl at the dog. My hair at the time was thick, dirty and looked like a lion's mane, so I'm sure that added to the gravitas of my growl. The dog stopped a few feet away from me, continued to bark, growl and gnash its teeth at me. We continued to growl at each other for what seems like a couple minutes, but was probably only 30 seconds. All of a sudden, I see another form come charging out of the encampment, a second mutt. This dog too begins to bark, growl and gnash its teeth at me. At this point, I'm starting to back away carefully toward the stairs, while still growling and gnashing my teeth at the dogs. The dogs are trying to move around me so one of them can get a strike in. As I continue to back away, the first dog lunges at my leg. I'm close enough to the stairs that I dodge the attack and leap onto a stair, and then kick the dog square in the face. After he overcommitted himself, the dog yelps and runs back to his encampment. The second dog and I continue to growl at each other for a bit more before we both began to back away, him to his encampment, me to the stairs. I beat a hasty retreat once he ran back to his master's encampment, but it may have taken me a while before I stopped growling at him. Story 2. Later that night, in my infinite lack of wisdom as an American college student in a foreign land, I figured that it'd be a great idea to go to a jazz bar by myself. So, as I'm walking around the poorly lit streets trying to locate Alexander Platt's jazz club, I notice a group of about 6 young Italian men, probably about 18 or 19. 2 of the group look at me, then they give each other a look that activated my spider sense. Was a first degree Aishin Ryu black belt at the time. I continue walking down the street, but I'm worried they're going to try and roll me, so I continue to keep my peripheral vision on them while they're behind me. They then get to the end of the block, stop and talk to each other, then immediately begin walking in my direction. I then arrived at an intersection, so I immediately take a right down a side street, then another right, and I double back around on them. As I get back to the original street, I see they've just arrived at the intersection where I turned from the main road and proceeded to run down the same side street as me. I then hustled my buns right out of there. TLDR, Rome was nice. Saw some sights, learned some history, fought a couple of dogs, avoided a mugging. My ex was Mexican. She was down in her city of Leon with her family for Xmas. I went down to meet her family and spend the holidays there. We were gonna go shopping that day at a mall. So we were gonna catch the bus and go to the mall. We were walking the streets and grabbed a few street stand tacos, yummy. We passed by some kids playing soccer in the streets and kept walking to the bus stop, playing on my iPhone the whole time even at the bus stop. Before I continue, let me give you some information. I'm 6 feet tall, and at the time I was about 220 pounds. Muscle and some extra taco pounds. I think of myself as a little above average in height in Canada. However, in Mexico I'm a giant. Huge. It would be as if I was 6 feet 8 inches 300 pounds in Mexico. Not only this, but I'm also the only white guy half of these people have seen in real life. I can't count how many times I heard "Mommy Blanco." So we are standing at the bus stop. I'm playing on my iPhone 3 at the time. Screen is shattered. I look up, and these 2 kids I had seen earlier playing soccer are running toward the bus stop. I didn't think anything of it, so I look back at my game on my phone. Few seconds later someone jumps on my back and has their arm wrapped around my neck, just hanging there. Then this other kid is in front of me with this rusty knife about a foot away from my stomach shaking. This kid is yelling at me which I don't understand, so my ex is translating while I'm being robbed. Something along the lines of, "You dirty dog, give us your phone." The ex is in shock and I'm thinking about the 10k pesos in my wallet. This kid is terrified of me, but I guess they made a plan before they robbed me and had to execute it. Anyways, I give them my broken iPhone and catch the bus to the mall. Before we boarded I still Could have caught them and beat the piss out at them, but I didn't want to risk the money or test my luck. Who knows who was around the corner or whose side the police would have taken. Later the day we go home and we tell her family the story. Her dad is furious because I guess we were in the bad area of the city with an iPhone out. She caught shit. I got a good story. So this was a few years ago, but I had been a witness to a murder. A friend shot 2 friends. So you know that all sucks. But later on I end up in court after 24 other witnesses throw my name in the mix. So I testify. Yeah, I know, I guess I'm a snitch, fuck it, I don't care. Kid ends up going to jail for a long time. Fast forward a year, my close friend hits me up and asks me to drive him to someone's house. I think fuck it, why not? So we meet up, roll a blunt, spark it, and he starts giving me directions. We end up going to a neighborhood that's known for trap houses and shit. We pull into a driveway and I still think nothing of it. I had been friends with this kid for 10 years and he never put me in harm's way. So he goes in the house, no big deal. When he comes out, a couple people come out behind him. I recognize one as the cousin of the kid I just helped put in jail, the one I snitched on. He goes back in, and a moment later about 25 people came pouring out of the house. Cousins, uncles, friends, and the kid's father all come out. And they are staring me down. I'm sitting in the car by myself, and look over, notice my door's unlocked, and I lock it. Then I also lock the back driver's side door. The father of the kid comes up to my window and tells me to get out of the car. I look him dead in the face and say nah. He obviously didn't like that, so he starts yelling and punching the window. And I'm just in the car, like there is like 30 of y'all. Why the fuck would I get out of the car? You're gonna have to pull me out. So I look over at my friend who brought me here, and he's almost in tears realizing what he did. He was asking them please don't hurt him. He didn't know we were coming here. I'm sorry, I know I shouldn't have brought him, but I had to come, and he was my only ride. As he's doing this, 2 of the dudes have their hand under their shirts on what I could only assume were guns. Later I found out they were in fact guns. He manages to calm them down enough to let him get back in the car and let us leave. Yay. I've got one, but I might be too late. Back when I used to do heroin, I was buying off this guy that was always out of his mind on meth. Myself and a friend stupidly would hang out with him sometimes on his property when we'd pick up to try to earn points with him because he didn't really have friends. So one day we had just picked up and done our shots and we were sitting in his trailer hanging out when he pulls out this revolver. He tells us it's his uncle's and he needed to get rid of it because it was hot, but wanted to play with it first. Uncle was one of the high-rank cartel coke guys, possibly biggest in Sokol, but we never saw him because he was literally under the house hiding out. So he says, let's play Russian roulette, and laughs, then points it at my friend, click, then at himself, click, then at me twice, click, click. I said something like, what the fuck dude, are you serious? Then he says, relax fool, it's not loaded at all. He points it at the door to the trailer and boom. He fires a hole through the trailer door. I still think about the odds. I don't gamble because I figured I've used up all the luck I was given in life. By the way, this happened 4 years ago and I'm the only one involved that is still alive. No more drugs or alcohol for me. TLDR, crazy meth head made me play Russian roulette, fired 1 shot at my friend, 1 at himself, 2 at me, then 1 through a door. I had an abusive ex who would threaten that one day he'd snap and that would be it. This was almost that day. He was playing Halo and having a rough night. My friend and our temporary roommate at the time called and asked if we could pick her up from work since she was getting off late and hoped she could avoid the bus. I asked him innocently enough if we could get her, and he snapped a no at me. Frustrated, I told her, explaining it was probably because he was angry about having a bad streak on multiplayer. That was my mistake. He jumped up, took my phone out of my hands, and threw it against a wall in an instant, causing a few cracks in the screen and knocking the battery out. He grabbed me, spun me around until he was restraining me with an arm around my neck, and started dragging me around the apartment telling me not to scream. This was it. Everything was over. You're going to die tonight. I tried to keep my cool. I started explaining how he didn't want to do this right now because the cops would come, see Halo in this box and blame video games for the violence. This was back towards the end of the whole Jack Thompson versus violence in video games thing, and my ex thought the whole thing was really dumb. It was a shot in the dark, but I had enough of an inkling that it would make him stop. He dragged me back in the living room and I almost thought I'd failed to convince him, panic starting to wash over me. He looked around and dropped me on the ground, apologizing and trying to appease me by offering to take me out for a milkshake. God, I'm so glad I escaped that entire situation. Well, two occasions. First was 3 years ago, about a week after July 4th. My ex and I were playing gunshot or firework, and we hear one go off. We both looked at each other and said gunshot. Turns out we unfortunately, right, and one of her friends was murdered that night. So about a week later, her, my roommate and my coworker who happened to live 2 houses down are getting toasty on the front porch. Dude walks up, and we start chatting. He says some slick shit about his kid being a man now he killed someone, and my ex realized it was her friend's murderer's father. So we start jetting fucking into it, and I tell him to fuck off. He says he's gonna come back with his crew. So I go inside and grab my Celtic sword and tell him I'm not scared, bitch. He leaves. So I'm sitting on my front porch for like an hour waiting for this fuck, and he never comes back. Turns out he flashed a gun at my coworker when I went inside. He never came back. Second, at a bar, and it's like 1:30 or 2, so it's popping and getting late. I'm pretty fucking inebriated at this point. Some huge black dude comes over to me and my friend and says like what's up or something. Now I'm drunk and I just word vomited what's up son. Now I don't know how drunk he was, but apparently don't say that to older black gentlemen. Dude gets livid and roans on about how that's so offensive he should kill me. So he pulls his gun out. Now mind you, we're in a crowded bar and it's mad late. So I'm not sure if anybody else even saw the gun or was sober enough to even know what was going on. This is the main bar in our city, so the street is blocked off by cops. I yelled at him pretty loudly, "Go ahead and shoot me, you faking nigger. This place is surrounded by cops, have fun getting faked in there, as because a drunk white kid called you son." I don't know who I offended by saying that, but he puts his gun in his waistband and left quickly. I think if I was sober either of those times things would have went down differently. My stepbrother threatened my life many times. When I lived with my sperm donor, SB would come home and turn the stereo up so loud when played Kiss that I had to leave the house. It made my ears actually hurt. People would complain, and the sperm donor told me to tell him the next time he played Kiss loudly. It was the SB said he would kill me if I told on him. Not long after, he was forced to get a mental evaluation. I found out when NSM cunt Rent got home and dragged me into SB's room to help find any and all darts, knives or anything sharp. This was due to 2 incidents. One day SB decided to hunt through the whole condo. He had heard the sperm donor might still have him army sidearm in the place. So SB finally found it back behind the drawers inside the dresser, hidden from view. SB found that the sperm donor was not a total moron, since he did not keep a clip or ammo. SB decides to go see his pal, Mr. Fuckup. Lucky they could find no clips of any kind. So SB walks home bummed, since no bang bang. Well, SB was not popular, him being an asshole bully, so the other like 9 kids he went to high school that lived in our condo development were not fans. As he is walking, the kids are hanging out. SB walks up, puts the gun to the girl's head, cocked them hammer, and said kiss it goodbye beach, and then pulled the trigger and laughed as she freaked out. The final straw was SB picking a fight in gym by calling a kid a homophobic slur. The fellow was not socially active, so he bare SB's ass. Later in the lunchroom, SB literally sunk up behind the other kid and tried to break a wooden chair on the kid's skull. NSM Rent, I remember, said how surprised no one said a word of warning as SB came up with the chair. FYI, it took 12 years but me and SB got relievin'. I've got one for you, Reddit. It's quite possible no one will even see this as I'm 8 days late to the party, but I have a hell of a story for you. Honestly speaking, this story isn't entirely my story to tell. It did affect me, though only indirectly initially, and I'm not proud to say not all of it paints me in the greatest light. How about a story with multiple almost murders from multiple parties? To understand how this even happened, I need to set the scene for you. I'm babysitting my sister and her 2 friends. They keep harassing me constantly and freaking me out running outside pretending they are in danger. They keep grabbing my remote from me when I'm watching DBZ and making fun of me for it TT, so I locked them out of the house finally. Not anything a babysitter, and especially an older brother, should ever do. Well, they like to go to this creek a few streets over behind our house. Since I had locked them out of the house, they went there. I didn't know they had gone anywhere. I had locked them out of the house and gone back to watching DBZ. Again, ever the watchful, responsible guardian. Oh, and I was 13 at the time. My sister and her friends were 10. Well, about a half hour passes and one of her friends run up to the door pounding on it saying, "Let me in." Please remember, they had been pretending to be chased by people less than an hour before because they thought it was funny to worry me. So initially I said, "Haha, very funny, you got me, good one," until I saw the look of sheer terror in her eyes and she started sobbing. So I let her in, and in between her sobs I start to grasp bits and pieces of what had happened and was still happening. Apparently they had gone to the creek because they were bored and couldn't get in the house. And while they were there, some truly awful evil pieces of shit arrived. Some boys just being boys, as their father later said when he defended them. The boys just being boys who brandished a massive knife and pistol at my sister and her friends and told them they were going to hunt them. Those boys. The boys who told them they were going to count to 10 and whoever got the farthest away got to live. Those assholes. But I'm getting ahead of myself, sort of. She told me they thought they heard someone and that maybe it was me trying to scare them back, turned around to find two redneck camo boys who might have been about my age, threatening them with a knife and then pulling a pistol on them and saying that crap I mentioned above. As she gets further into the story, she tells me that my sister told her two friends to run in opposite directions to get help, which means she was still there. My little sister is being threatened by some evil assholes with guns and knives, and I'm sitting at home watching DBZ. Oh hell no. At this point I stop hearing anything my sister's friend is saying. She is still talking to me, but all I see and hear is red. I'm a pacifist and the only thought on my mind is someone is gonna die. I tell her to call 911 and I grab my bokken, wooden training sword used when practicing Aikido, art of the sword, and run out of the house full speed, jumping over the porch railing ready to kill or be killed. Just stop my sister from getting killed. Fully aware I'm outmatched, fully aware I have only trained with the sword for about 3 months. They have guns. There are 2 of them. My intention is just to beat them to death and save my sister. I don't care if I get shot or stabbed as long as they die and she is safe. Not to mention I'm furious with myself for locking them out of the house, and for the few seconds I didn't believe her friend. Every second counts. Right as I'm getting ready to haul us into the woods, or die, a few things simultaneously happen. A police car pulls up, sirens blaring, a bullhorn screams at me to drop your weapon now. And my sister comes running out of the woods, scratched up and bruised, crying and screaming for help. Summary of the next events. A month plus of multiple detectives coming to our house to interview my sister and ask about the boys. The boys being taken to juvie, their father defending them with, "They're just boys being boys," garbage, saying it was a toy gun. It wasn't. My sister and her friends forgiving them. The boys having to write an apology letter and getting suspended from school for a month. That was their punishment for threatening to kill and hunt little girls. A month suspension, some community service, and an apology letter. The detective handed the girls the letter, they read it, and then they burned it right in front of me. This might have been because I said to anyone who spoke to me, friends, family, strangers, and law enforcement, "I'm going to kill them." To this day I still want to. Probably the only people I genuinely wish death would befall. But I don't know what they look like, their names, where they live, nothing at all. If I did, I would have been in prison a long time ago. I think my sister only forgave them because she didn't want to lose her brother. But I haven't forgiven them, and I haven't forgiven myself. Probably never will. I know that was a long read. My mom went on a missions trip with some family friends, one of whom was a police officer. They went to Brazil. Well, since they were white and had an accent, everyone thought they were rich. They took a cab, and it turned out to be a gang member taking them to hold them for ransom. Nobody had any money, so they would have been killed. But then the guy who was a police officer said something along the lines of, "What the fuck did you just faking say about me, you little bitch? I'll have you know I graduated top of my class in the Navy SEALs, and I've been involved in numerous secret raids on Al-Qaeda, and I have over 300 confirmed kills. I'm trained in guerrilla warfare, and I'm the top sniper in the entire US Armed Forces. You are nothing to me, but just another target. I will wipe you the fuck out with precision the likes of which has never been seen before on this earth. Mark my faking words. You think you can get away with saying that shit to me over the internet? Think again, faker. As we speak I'm contacting my secret network of spies across the USA and your IP is being traced right now, so you better prepare for the storm, maggot. The storm that wipes out the pathetic little thing you call your life. You're faking dead, kid. I can be anywhere, anytime, and I can kill you in over 700 ways, and that's just with my bare hands. Not only am I extensively trained in unarmed combat, but I have access to the entire arsenal of the United States Marine Corps. And I will use it to its full extent, to wipe your miserable ass off the face of the continent, you little sheet. If only you could have known what unholy retribution your little clever comment was about to bring down upon you, maybe you would have held your faking tongue. But you couldn't, you didn't, and now you're paying the price, you goddamn idiot. I will sheet fury all over you, and you will drown in it. You're faking dead, kiddo.